meeting first because it's fairly short, and we have some folks here who want to make a presentation for that. So we'll go ahead, we'll make it sit through a whole town council meeting until 9 o'clock or whatever. So anyway, but we will use the same format for starting the meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance and the moment of silence. So would you go ahead, April, and get this thing started by calling roll?
Yes, thank you. Board Chair Volger.
Here.
Board Member Bergon.
Here.
DeGraaf.
Here.
DeGuise.
Here.
Pierce.
Here.
And Posey.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, if you please stand with me and
So this is the first one's a sanitation meeting and then town council. Perfect.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And before I accept public comment, well, before we'll do the moment of silence, of course, but just a little bit of a focus. I have a habit, I don't know if it's a bad habit or a good habit, of self-evaluation. Sometimes I don't like what I see. And, you know, there are two ends of the spectrum when it comes to motive. And I had a little plaque on my wall in the office that said, "Don, what's your motive?" Ooh, that can be a tough one to assess. And for me it is, because on one end of the spectrum, you've got, you know, almost total self-centeredness, right? And then on the other end, you have more altruism. And sometimes what I see and I judge my motive or ask myself, why did I do that? I'll find it's pretty selfish. And, you know, as public servants, I don't like that. And for me personally, I don't want to be that way. You know, but it's a natural response to a lot of things. I want to look good or feel good or be right or stay in control or all those self-centered aspects of the human being. So I also, even though I will try to evaluate my own motive as best I can, which is difficult, I try not to evaluate other motives for other people. You know, I try to give them the benefit of the doubt. But there's one thing that's fortunate about that is with the council members, and I know most of them pretty well. Don't know Jeff real well yet, but from what I've heard and what I know about him and the rest of the council members is that their motive is to do the best they can for the welfare of this community. And, you know, try to set self aside and look at the big picture for the community. So what I challenge all of us to do is just during this moment of silence, let's just check our hearts. Where are we right now and during this meeting? So let's just take a moment of silence. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us, everybody. Now this is public comment that we're going to accept for the GID meeting. And is there anybody who wants to make public comment at the beginning of the sanitation district? Okay, then we'll go ahead and jump right into the consent agenda. Is there anything on the consent agenda that council would like to have taken off for further discussion? If not, I'll accept the motion. Go ahead.
Move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Let's take we don't have to take a roll call vote yet because Nicole's not here, right? So all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, passes unanimously. Now let's go on down to our first order of business, which is the approval of the October, that's consent agenda, the unfinished business. So Martin, you want to introduce that for us?
Evening Board. Tonight we're considering the second reading of Ordinance 18. It's a petition for inclusion. For the record, it's Ordinance 18, Series 2021, second reading of a petition for inclusion of the Hill property. This was presented to you at your last meeting, beginning of this month, and the report and the conditions remain pretty much the same. Except that the owner was unable to procure 6-inch sewer line to put in along the roadway due to shortage of PVC. And as I said in my last report, very concerned about getting this done before the winter. He approached the board, approached the GID immediately when that happened, and we said that it was okay to go ahead with that 4-inch line. That would still support himself and the single neighboring property that is existing, but not anymore. Sewer lines are kind of a exponential curve. You get 2 houses on a 4-inch line, on a 6-inch line you can do 10, on an 8-inch line you can do 400. You know, I mean, it just keeps going up. So, well, that's unfortunate he wasn't able to do that. We accepted that as a reasonable reason not to. But other than that, this report was the same. I haven't had any feedback from anybody since the last time this was presented to the board. We did get the legal notice from the Sun published in this one, so we have notarized, we fulfilled our role of getting that legal notice of this petition for inclusion. And the owner is intending to get this work done in the next 2 weeks if it moves forward. I believe the owner is online if there were any questions from the board. But with that,
Okay, this is second reading. So any questions? Mark, any discussion? Chair will entertain a motion. Go ahead.
Mr. Mayor, I move to approve the second reading of Ordinance 18, allowing the inclusion of the Eric and Kendra Hiddle property into the PSS GID.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. So all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, passes unanimously. Okay, the next item is new business. And Martin, it's a request for capital investment fee waiver for 10 Pierce Street.
Mr. Chair, can I get a clarification from Clay if I should recuse myself on this? That I have no financial interest in this property, but it was sold from my in-laws estate to the current owner.
What's the issue we're talking about?
The fee waiver for 10 years.
It's going to be a personal decision. Years. So, I mean, if there's no, if you don't have any substantial personal or financial interest in it, then you should not recuse yourself.
Thank you. All right, is the fellow board members still okay with that? Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, go ahead, Martin.
so I'm just going to introduce this shortly, and then let Steve Graham, the petitioner, step forward and present his case to the board. So this is a request of a fee waiver for 10 Pierce Street, which is the old Pierce house near the high school parking lot, between 7th and 6th and 7th Street. Just so you're aware of where that is, there is an image attached to this brief, so you know what we're talking about. And we have documents that are attached with your brief. It's difficult to make out the date. The best that we can read is 1983 is when this was considered. And so the fee waiver was passed by the board at that time, and the fee waiver that was granted was in the amount of $300 in the 80s. And so the new owner is petitioning for the remainder of the SIP fee to be waived. And with that, I'll turn it over to Stephen Graham, Steve, it's okay. To present his case on why the fee waiver from then should be applied to his ownership of the property. He's requesting to tap into the sewer line shortly to get that online.
Okay.
So.
Steve, you want to have a seat up?
Sure. Both little statements, kind of keep it shorter and longer. I'd like to thank you guys for taking the time to discuss this item on today's agenda, although I might disagree with the way it was titled. I don't think I'm asking for a fee waiver. rather asking the board to honor its previous commitments. Pierce family made several significant contributions to both the town and the district. I don't believe the planned investment fee that was given to them in payment for exchange for real property was intended to expire at any point. I understand the need for rules regarding capital investment fees and the timeliness of those services to be put to beneficial use. As costs rise, the district must adjust. Without such, the financial burden of yesterday's subdivisions might be shifted to today's members. It's safe to say the cost of an investment fee has increased since the agreement was made in '79, according to the town document.
Yeah, there's some different dates depending on where the easement versus the PIF was waived. So.
And so is the value of this particular real estate, and this situation is different. Records indicate that the sanitation district in the town proactively took action to obtain what is now known as Pierce Street. There was no plan or schedule for installation of the main line, according to the initial request. The letter of understanding spells out the town's desire for the agreement to be mutually beneficial to the owners, and the sanitation district investment fee worksheet shows what was given to the Pierces. It could have been seen as unfair for the district at that time to overpay the Pierces for their property, and it could also be seen as equally unfair to obtain it at a lower than market rate. Without conveyance of this tap fee, the district essentially got this property for free. I myself have been approached by this district to donate personal assets for the betterment of all. And I can imagine how Harlan and Mary might have felt when Modesto wrote a letter asking them for the same. It would be a shame to disregard their generosity at this time. And so, essentially, I don't feel like it's a waiver. This is one of the oldest houses in Pagosa. This was initiated by the district at that time, and if you follow the discussion, you know, the initial letter says you'll have to pay for it when the time comes, and then the town document says they want it to be mutually beneficial, and then the investment fee shows where it was given. So I can imagine that when approached for free, the Pierces were maybe less than enthused. Inclusion into the district, you know, you'd imagine the district wants that house to be on the district system. And by putting the street there and putting the sewer main there to get a septic system with, you know, within the district to be placed in the system was part of the intent of that board at that time. And I think that the only reason it wasn't actually completed, if you will, was after the line was installed. By then, it's my understanding that Mary was a widow. And so the cost alone to install a line for this widowed woman, when she's elderly, became prohibitive. Her son actually dug the ditch on the way to the street in an attempt to do this before. And so now, I don't think I'm asking for a waiver. I think there's documents that show that. And I'm not too certain about when, you know, the regulation 4.2.7 that talks about beneficial use was actually even implemented. And it seems like if that regulation was implemented after this, you know, tap fee was given, it seems fair to grandfather it in, because without it, it was free. Which is kind of an interesting thing, given the critical nature of infrastructure as it now sits. So.
Okay, any questions either for Steve or for?
Yeah, for both. So I'm a little, I think I understand it, which is basically that, Steve, you're arguing that it's already been paid.
Correct.
In one way or another, and that was back then. And now we at the town, or the GID, are wondering, well, was it really paid?
No.
Is that
sorry.
Disconnect?
No, we do agree that $300 amount was waived, so no payment was ever made. But the $300 PIF fee, the time plan investment fee, was waived. The thing is that every iteration of the rules and regulations I've been able to find has something about beneficial use in it. Meaning, if you get a tap, or you get a tap waiver, you need to put, which the payment of the PIF was the time period when the tap was put into motion, as it were. iteration of the rules and regs says you need to put it into beneficial use within a certain period of time. All of the most recent ones are within a year. Some of them just say within a period of time. But they all have some sort of a penalty. And usually it's some or all of the difference between the TIF in the past and the current rate. And so we have had some sort of you pay for it, use it. Very similar. The one I included is what's currently in the rules and regs we're operating under. And that's why I said, okay, well, I agree $300 was waived, which means there's a remaining difference. The remaining would be that $43.25. And so that's why staff told Mr. Graham that he still had the remaining difference to pay. And he requested this time in front of the board for you to consider the intent of the past board and the current rules and regulations.
Thanks.
Go ahead, Shari.
I would disagree with the word waived. The family was approached to donate the half lots for the sewer main to go in, and in exchange, they were given the planned investment fee. So it wasn't really waived, it was essentially, to me, a sale of one for the other, just to clarify that. And I would say what was the intent at the time. I think the intent by the Modesto Montoya was to get a sewer main in, and then in exchange for being able to do that, the Pierces could connect to that sewer main.
Go ahead, Matt.
Did you know that the property was not in the GID when you purchased it?
Yeah, but I saw the documents that said that what fee was given to them, so I didn't, as a function of improving the community and having the house and doing all that to get it off the septic system, it was part of our mission.
Has the property been taken for a long time?
Since Mary passed, it's been vacant. We purchased it shortly thereafter and tried a couple different things that we're remodeling. We've subdivided it. There's adjacent lots now. The septic system of the house is actually on one of the lots we've subdivided. It's mandatory now for us to connect to it. And so that's kind of why I think even back then, Modesto was like, yeah, let's get you on the system. And then when the sewer line was installed, maybe, I don't know when actually it was installed. Do you know that section was installed? Investment fee was in 1983, but I've been wondering, was it 10 years after the Pierces? We said, sure. And they shook on the deal that the line was finally installed. I mean, finances changed a lot in terms of, and even then Mary's concept of, I gotta dig a ditch and put a PVC out into the street. And then, flow field comes along and all of a sudden it's a couple $1,000 on a fixed income. There's reasons why it didn't happen. It wasn't because there wasn't intent on the Pierce's part. And furthermore, similar to just the actual burden of the district now, today, I don't think is a significant, for this particular house, is a significant change. Since I stated that the value of the tap has gone up significantly, what is those half lots worth today? I'm going to say it's risen at equal value. And so to say that the reciprocation and exchange of value at that time was not diminished because of a rule, I don't believe that to be the case.
Actually, Maddie.
Okay, so you mentioned there was some subdivision. In theory, would those other lots then have to pay a tap fee?
Yes, they do.
Okay, so this
potential house, this 100-year-old house.
Okay, intended fee waiver would not apply to other lots and other buildings.
Just this building.
Can I make a motion? Or do we want to have more discussion?
I have a question. It says it was not connected due to flow fill issues. What does that mean?
That's the statement that I got from Mr. Graham, that the cost of flow fill was too expensive when they went to connect, and that's the reason that they decided not to connect. So flow fill is a concrete stabilized gravel that we we mandate for all road cuts everywhere underneath our roads so that we don't have huge settling issues and failure of the roadways. So, again, the reason that I couldn't take care of this difference in cost administratively is that we are operating under current rules and regulations that has the difference of the SIF from the previous amount payment, whether they paid $300 in 1979, they could have paid cash to connect, and if they didn't, they need to pay the difference, and that's how it works. We don't do an inflationary amount based on when they pay to connect and when they do connect.
This may be a legal question, I don't know. Was the agreement made with the former property owner or with the property itself?
That next page, it has signatures on it, but I don't know. So the easement agreement does not speak specifically to the waiver of the GID amounts. It's the connection application that talks about the waiver of the fees, or the exchange of land for fees. And so the actual annexation document doesn't speak to this.
So does the application, is it made by the owner or by the property?
It's tied to the property, you just can't move a sewer line. It is in your packet, it's the very gray document, and this is the version that was given to me, so your scanned copy is that quality, it's not a bad scan. So,
Okay, any other questions? Discussion?
Well, I was going to get an answer from Clay about whether the legal agreement was with the property owner or the property itself from 40 years ago.
Well, he's doing that. Do you mind if I open or have this discussion? Yeah. So I really like what Shari said about the intent was for the GID to get an easement to put in the line that it wanted to put in. And in exchange for the granting of that easement, or for allowing them to put that main sewer line in, they then allowed that property to connect to the GID and not actually exchanging any money, but more of a handshake deal. And I think that we should honor that deal.
Sure.
And Mr. Chair, given the statement that I made earlier, I feel like maybe I should probably recuse myself from the vote, because I think my statement could be seen as maybe a statement for Mr. Bergon. So
I took it more as context, not a pro or a for or against.
I appreciate that. I don't want to make anything muddy for the board. So, if you have any other questions for me, I'll answer them. Otherwise, I think I'll disappear while you finish this discussion.
But yeah, I agree with you, Matt, that we should honor what previous boards were kind of intending. And it is unfortunate that so much time has passed between this statement and now. I do feel a little bit more comfortable pursuing kind of waiving or accepting the waiver of this fee, given the fact that we do have some subdivided properties that can still potentially tap in. I mean, this fund is not sitting very good, so any waiver that we do is a little bit of a gut punch to us, but I think that there's a little bit of potential for more development there for us to kind of recoup some of our losses.
In a nutshell, you're very correct. There's multiple tax fees coming that were not there prior to our subdivision, so we've actually tripled the potential users.
Yeah, it seems to me the crux of the issue is whether the agreement was made with the prior owner or is tied to the property. If it was made with the prior owner, we've got a new owner after 40 years, and that agreement wouldn't stand anymore because it was made with the owner, not the property. But if the agreement was made with the property, then it should still stand. That seems to me the dividing line to me, if we can determine that.
I feel the owner gave up some of their property for the benefit of the GID.
The past owner, not the current owner.
Right, correct, past owner, but it's like property for property.
then, but not now, not by the current owner. Current owner wasn't asked to give up any property, current owner bought it as is.
No, fair. I guess I'm a handshake guy, and
And I don't disagree with that. If the handshake was legally with the property, then I'd say honor it, but if it was with the prior owner, then that's gone.
But I'd say by default, if it's with the property owner, it has to include the property. And so it's like, the agreement has to be with the property
Well,
itself as well.
it's like a deed restriction that goes to the ground, that's tied to the ground. Regardless of who buys it and changes it, that deed restriction stays. But any agreement with the property owner goes away when the property owner goes away. That seems to me.
Go ahead.
Just one thing that occurred to me, Mr. Mayor, or Board Chair, is that since this is an enterprise fund, we would need to expend monies out of the general fund to make up this difference for the tap fee. So if you do decide to make a motion to waive this, then I would include to pull money from general fund reserve in the amount of $43.25 from the general fund for payment to the GID fund for this purpose.
why is that?
Because it's an enterprise fund.
But this has in theory already been paid.
But it actually isn't. It's not paid until it's been installed and put into beneficial use, right? So that's that whole thing about,
Okay.
if someone bought it 20 years ago, we would make them pay the difference between what was paid then and them actually putting it in now, which is $46.25.
But I might add, there was no sewer line in place at that time. So they're gonna wait, it was completely up to the district to actually install something. And that's why I don't think there was ever an expiration date. She provided the easement, and Modesto's letter says there is no plan at this time. When it happens, and it says, and if, and if it happens, so that just implies that it wasn't even there. It wasn't like this, we're gonna get it in 5 years, and then a year after, you have to put your line in. It was like, hey, whenever we do it, you can hook up. And so that's a real distinct point, because after the fact, we can implement rules that say, okay, 1 year, and that authorizes us to take back what we already gave. That feels a little weird to me, and that's really the foundation of my argument, is that to retroactively remove something that was already distributed because of the technical later adoption of regulations is unjust, and in fact, not fair to the Pierces or the intent of the prior board or the district. And the town documentation clearly spells out that they wished it to be beneficial for both the town and the owners of those 2 acres. And so to your point, is it the property the owner? In the town's documentation, it says the owners of this property. The district had to create a separate document because the town can't give away the tap fee. The district had to give that tap fee. So I'm reading between the lines, the town said we want it to be beneficial. They used the district arm to create that benefit for the Pierces. And it was a technical issue of Widow not being able to get it installed. And so that's fine.
Yeah, so I equate it with like having a handshake agreement with your neighbor. You're gonna build a fence and split the cost, but before you build it, the neighbor moves, somebody else buys it. They're not beholden to that handshake agreement because the ownership has changed. This feels similar.
I think we're talking about real property though, real estate, things that have value associated to it, not hey, let's go to Home Depot and split this. We're talking about property lines being moved, assets changing,
I
and
agree.
that's a little bit different in terms of.
And that property line was moved before you purchased the property.
And other parcels that I've had have, through different districts, fees that have traveled with them. When Paws decided to put their capital investment fee on the water, there was a herd of people that ran down there and paid their investment fees on their property because they knew after that fact it was going to go up. If they got in under the cut, it was established. After the fact, it was going to be really expensive. So that's kind of the same precedent. There was this value established before that they got in under this line, so after the fact, you're not subject to this cost increase.
And the prior owners failed to rush down there and get it done.
But there was no line to connect to, right? There wasn't even a street there. Like, that's what to me, the nutshell.
I cannot speak to the exact date that was installed, but based on the condition of the sewer line and what neighborhoods are connected and drained through that by gravity, I'm very comfortable saying that the sewer line was installed within the next 10 to 15 years for this agreement. And I understand that's a big range of time, but it wasn't installed 5 years ago.
25 or 30 years ago.
Yes. It drains all of South 9th Street, south of Zuni. It takes care of all of Hillcrest, 10th Street, sections of 9th Street, and the radio tower, and areas in that part of town. So none of those places had sewer until this big line. So I'm very comfortable with that time frame.
Okay.
Can you get a opinion from Clay, maybe? Is that appropriate?
At this time, I don't know if he hasn't had a chance to research or do anything, and so for him to make a findings, it makes it difficult. So, unless you would like to, I'm going to leave that up to you.
If you direct me, Mr. Chairman, I'd be happy to, give a black and white opinion on it. I don't have an opinion as to what the board should do, but I can answer the question as to who are the parties of this agreement.
Okay, so that was just the question you asked, right?
Correct.
Okay.
So the parties of the agreement were the owners at the time in the town of Pagosa Springs. It was signed by Harlan and Mary Pierce as persons, and there's no indication of any easements or other appurtenances that would attach to the property and run with the property. That just means based on the documents alone that Mr. Graham is not a party to the agreement. But it doesn't mean under the theory of estoppel or some other equitable theory that the town, or excuse me, that the board could decide to give him the fee anyway.
Okay. Any additional information that needs to come to our attention? Okay, the chair will entertain a motion.
I would move to, I have to think about how to word this up. I would like to waive the $4,325 connection fee.
We have a motion.
And to pull the amount from the general fund reserves.
And pull the amount from the general fund reserves.
Second.
Okay. We don't have Nicole here, and so there are the five of us, so let's take, I'll tell you what, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Okay, roll call vote.
Board Member DeGraaf,
Aye.
DeGuise,
Aye.
Bergon,
Aye.
Posey,
Nay.
and Chairman Volger.
Aye. Okay. Are you disappointed?
No. This is the right thing to do. For your statement in the beginning, questioning my intent, or, our own intent, I don't feel like this is something that we're trying to obtain for our particular benefit. It gets, a very old house on the system and sets it up for housing for someone in our community. And that's really our goal, is to try to accelerate that program. With this, we can begin to schedule and begin to focus on the future and get that house into our market. So, appreciate it.
Okay, let's move on now to the next order of business,
We've got about 12.
which is the next board meeting.
Yeah.
That's all we've got there. So the next board meeting is going to be November 2nd at 5 o'clock. And I'll accept the motion to adjourn.
So moved.
We've got motion second, any objection? Okay, we're adjourned. Now, we're going to go ahead and start the town council meeting. And I was going to say something about public comment. Over the last, probably year, and then a little bit prior to COVID, well, you guys all know that I've been pretty lax on, we used to have a 3-minute time period, and I let people go a little over that. And I don't really know how long I let them go with that. And some would come in and feel that it was appropriate to make a presentation when we needed to limit the amount of time for public comment so other people could make some public comments if needed. And we could have as efficient meeting as possible. So that's the reason. It kind of goes back to the filibuster things that they used to do in politics years ago, right? Somebody get up and talk forever. And so that's kind of the rationale behind that. And what I would like to see is that we just all be respectful of each other and the time. And so I don't even know what is a reasonable amount of time, whether it's 3 minutes or whether it's 5 or what's reasonable. And so what we're doing in this meeting, when we get public comment, I'm not going to cut it off at any particular time. I'm going to let you speak. I would encourage you to be respectful and to try to do it as concisely as possible. And then we're going to time it, and then we're going to see, how much time it was and whether we felt it was reasonable or not based on what we need to do for our meetings. So I hope you understand that, and I am going to entertain public comment. If anybody would like to make some before the meeting, we will entertain public comment when we talk about agenda item. Reports to council. When we talk about the discussion of possible ballot questions for upcoming elections. Okay, we're going to talk about a lot of them, and that's going to be a general discussion. And so I'm going to accept public comment at that time if that's one of the issues that you might want to make comment on. And other than that, if there's any public comment for anything else, then go ahead and make it. Go ahead.
I actually
Just name,
talked
if you would, please.
Ellen Schmidt, and I have a handout. Maybe you guys can share. I found this in Facebook. I'm an old-fashioned person. But due to the nature of this metal wing, I was kind of disturbed about it. And I didn't prepare anything special, but it says all ages. And down here it says parental advisory, explicit lyrics and stuff. And then it has a little cherub thing that's a nude little picture. And on the back it talks, I think these are bands that are playing. Feet, When Darkness Falls, Project BC, I, Skinwalker, DMT Fetus, Mommy Milkers. Go back to DMT Fetus. I think DMT is a hallucinogenic drug. And it feels like they're promoting that, and I don't feel like that's something that we want to promote for our children and teens. I mean, we already have issues here. But I was looking it up because I'm not super familiar with it, but it made me very uncomfortable with promoting something like that. I don't even know where it's going to happen. Let me read what it says. DMT is a potent and unsafe hallucinogenic drug. It's not inherently addictive, but users can develop a psychological dependence. Learn the facts about this unusual drug. And I read a little bit more about it, but I just thought maybe you guys could consider the nature of it and how it might affect our community. That's it.
Okay, any other public comment? Go ahead, sir.
Bill Hudson, 446 Lone Street. Just a quick reminder for the council. We established a home rule charter in 2005, I think. Something before that, 2003. And part of that charter is allows for citizen initiatives and citizen referendums. And the reason I think that those are in the home rule charter is that sometimes our leadership makes decisions that the people don't abide by, that they can't abide. And that gives the people a chance to make a change to the way the government's operating. If the voters say, no, we didn't really like that decision, we're really, I mean, you're sitting here as leaders, but the power is really in the people. They take precedence over the council if they decide as a group to make their decision and bring it to the rest of the voters. So don't be offended in the future if the people want to do an initiative or a referendum. You're doing a great job. I really like this council that we have, but there may be times in the future where the people will have to step up and say, they didn't do this and we want it done, or they did this and we didn't want it done. So just a little reminder of who's really in charge.
Okay. Any other public comment? Go ahead, Nick.
Chrissy Harris, 57 Pagosa Springs. I was born in Colorado, lived in different ski areas all over Colorado. I'm kind of a ski area sort of family. Got an Olympian gold medal winner skiing in my family. And we moved to Pagosa Springs, my husband and I, 30 years ago, so that we could raise our children here, because it had mixed, it's very family oriented. It wasn't in the Golden Triangle, which is the Wilmette Vale, Aspen area where we came from. And we wanted them to be around real people. And because I lived in those areas, and I was on the historic board when Colorado Preservation started. I was on the board of that, was the vice president of that. And I served on the historic board here for several years, 14 I think. And I'm just very concerned about the quality and the type of people that are coming here, because I saw it all over the western slope. And it's a different kind of people. Not that they're bad, it's not good or bad. It's just that they don't live here. They put their house on the, Airbnb or whatever. We have so many on our street, it's ridiculous now. We're losing our sense of community. Even though our street looks really good, that we have this wonderful sidewalk and a lot of sort of planting plants, and that gives me, it's the first sidewalk that I've ever had in my adult life. But I just want to say that when is enough? How much, is it all about money? It's not. It's about community. I just got back from Costa Rica. My kids took me there because I lost my husband last year. And I've also lost my mother here. We brought her here from Hot Springs to live with us. And the outpouring of people and love from the community made me want to really stay here, because it was incredible. And been to Costa Rica several times. They call it Pura Vida, the good life. But it was different. The 1%ers who moved in, and instead of being happy, gentle souls like they are, like they used to be, they look like deers in headlights, because Johnson & Johnson moved there. They're building these gigantic houses. We're going to get a gigantic house on our block. They're going to scrape it. When is enough enough? You know, don't we have enough? I think we have people, we have good people here. But we're getting people that don't care. All they want to do is make a buck.
Okay. Anybody else? Let's move on then to the consent agenda for the council meeting. Is there anything that council members would like to have taken off or privilege? Okay, Chair, will entertain a motion.
Big happens.
Matt, and then if you want to.
I move to approve the consent agenda.
Second. Okay. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, passes unanimously. Let's go on down to reports to council, and we have the Community Development Corporation quarterly report. Andrea, you were gonna handle this one?
I think that would be Councilmember DeGuise for the CDC.
The big news is that CDC has hired a new executive director. There will be a press release coming out shortly with the hiree's name due to current job conflicts. It's still can't announce who it's going to be. The other big news is a lot of progress on broadband recently. The 200 and 400 block of Lewis Street can get fiber to the home or your business. They're adding, as they're working down Lewis Street, and they'll begin working on the south side of the highway rapidly to get and it's through Visionary, but it's fiber. It's not their wireless technology anymore. Additional projects out into the county, into the PLPOA, in the works. The fiber project that was scheduled for Wolf Creek had to be postponed. The general contractor ended up going bankrupt and had to put that out for bid again and find a new contractor. So that's scheduled now for next year. That will increase the redundancy in the area as well as hopefully bringing competition and lower costs. The fiber lease revenues are increasing, which means we're getting additional ISPs into the neighborhood. They're keeping their costs low to incentivize people to come in and compete in the market instead of increasing the fiber rates to generate more revenue. So it looks like the broadband services manager office is still going to be government funded for the next several years, but they're looking at probably self-sufficient by 2024. And then our broadband services manager contract is up at the end of this year. They handle the project management, stakeholder engagement, doing the locates, a whole handful of different things kind of behind the scenes managing this. The new RFP is going to be drafted and released. Our current team of Eric Hittle and Jason Cox aren't interested in doing it. Hopefully we find a quality candidate. But we know already Jason's not going to apply.
Thank you for that report. Sorry, I just read the top of it and I'd gone down through it, but I missed the first sentence. Okay, my bad. All right, next, go ahead, Matt.
It's not my turn to really give a report, but I wanted to share with the council something that was really awesome from the Parks and Rec department, and that is that the Mesa Canyon takeout down Trujillo Road is like 99% done. And that was something that we moved on, a year and a half ago or so. And so that's like done, and we should be really proud of that.
Sweet. Thank you for that. Okay, Southwest Council of Governors.
Since there's a lot in your packet, I probably won't go over all of these, but I do just want to point out that the COG is stepping up in terms of planning on a regional basis for workforce housing. In your consent agenda, you just approved a letter of support for them to apply under House Bill 21-1271. And that's a planning grant for the region to look at how we can implement various initiatives down the road. There's also a policy memorandum in there from CCI, CML, CAST, and the spinoff of CCI, CCAT. And they're urging the ARPA task force at the state level to make those funds available for housing priorities. And then finally, a housing subcommittee of the COG has formed, and we had our first meeting on October 13th. Some of the things that we've talked about just in our initial meeting is trying to attract a modular home manufacturing plant somewhere in the region, seeing that as a potential for implementing a lot of housing initiatives in all of the counties. And then possibly aggregating land in each of our communities to attract a developer. So there's some interesting things happening there, and Councilmember Pierce is the alternate. I don't know if there's anything that you wanted to add on to that. Okay. That's it.
Thank you folks for spending an extra time and effort on keeping in touch with us. So, anyway, let's go right on down to the Transportation Planning Region Quarterly Report. And Martin.
So I thought there was another one. Evening Council. So this is the Southwest Transportation Planning report. I'm the primary and Andrea is the secondary. And we both attended the most recent meeting where we got a lot of different updates. It's in your packet in a bulleted list, and the most exciting thing, of course, are the local projects that are going to occur in and around Pagosa Springs, and the updates to the Cape Creek project. They fell a little bit behind on the Cape Creek project, but they're still anticipating the same winter shutdown and the same spring startup, so it's really on-site things that have shifted a little bit, and the same project mandate at this point. If you drive by that project and look to the south from the highway, you can kind of see the future slope of that drainage. Those are the rough slopes for that. So that's the intended angle of those banks on either side of that old foundation wall. The foundation wall will go away once they can remove the pipes. Wildlife Overpass project doesn't anticipate any more full road closures in the middle of the night. And so that project is, again, a little bit behind schedule, and they're really hoping to get it done this season, but there might be some cleanup, planting things and stuff like that that occur in the next season. The multimodal planning grant that we got with CDOT and we're moving forward with on the East Side Gateway has had its first round of public input meetings, and we've gotten some really good feedback, and we're continuing to revise those proposals. The next step is meeting with stakeholders, such as property owners in the area, to get direct and feedback from them. We already heard about the Wolf Creek Fiber installation project. At this point, they're about to go out to bid for the resurfacing and restriping project that goes from 7th Street all the way to around Estrada Saddle on your way down the hill towards Aspen Springs. So that's going to be milling or repaving in that area. Some of it's just a 6-inch lift of asphalt, some of it's milling what's there, and just depending on where it's going to be. But that's going to be a big project with all the intersections and things that have to be taken care of, because that's the most project now. And then the Main Street Corridor Plan, town staff has had initial meetings with CDOT to refresh and dust off that corridor plan that we put together for a potential 2023 season of construction on that project. And we're going to be closely working with CDOT to make sure that it isn't just a concrete highway through town, but it's a benefit to the entire community. And then An exciting update we got from Archuleta County is that they've got an initial approval of a Durango Archuleta County Future Transit Center electric bus route that would have three trips a day from Durango to Pagosa Springs to serve the public, and they'd be fully electric buses. Pretty cool to get that, but we've been looking for some sort of public transport for a long time between the two communities. And it looks like we have some funding and some ability to get that done. So that was exciting to hear as a local update. The other thing that is happening is because of some of the funding that's come down from the state level and the federal level, and the potential infrastructure bill that's still in limbo at the federal level, CDOT was able to get the 10-year project plan done, or not done. They were able to get the 5-year project plan, which is the small part of the 10-year plan, done in 2 to 3 years instead of in 5. And so we're actually going to revisit that 10-year planning effort and try to organize that missing 2 years, crunch that everything down. And we're basically, CDOT's accelerating the opportunity to do some pretty good sized projects. So town staff will be involved in that planning effort and try again to get some of these big projects to come to Pagosa and make sure that we continue to work well with CDOT and get projects in the area that improve the community. With that, I'm open for any questions.
Any questions? Go ahead, Shari.
On the Main Street corridor plan, I know that's all been approved and everything, but I'm wondering if it would be something that we should look at before it moves out to bid, in case there's any things we want to look at, maybe changing.
So the rough indication from CDOT is that we're about a year away from where we'd see bid, and it really was a dust-off meeting. We did talk with CDOT about needing to bring it back to council and make sure that there was a clear understanding of what was included and not included in the project. So thank you for the input.
Thank you.
Anything else from Mark? Thank you. Thank you. Okay, let's go on down. Watch you stay seated. Geothermal Greenhouse Partnership.
Again, council, it's me. The domes have been continuing to move forward with a bunch of different little projects and grant applications. They're improving all of the domes continually. You can see that in the report. One of the things that they've done is they've applied for it and they've become part of the Colorado Gives program, which is a way to donate to the domes on a statewide level. And on the Colorado Gives Day, if you search for geothermal, and you search for community grow facilities or things like that across the state, you'll be able to find them. So that's a big step forward for them. And there is an application process, and they don't let everybody in there. So I put the link in your brief to see that we have a local 401c3 that is now searchable on a statewide level for donations. So hopefully that helps them continue their mission. They did want to say thank you in their last meeting because we paved in front of the geothermal domes there, and they're very excited about that. And they've been a good partner in that area, helping that area grow and paving the section that we did pave, and it's continuing to improve that area. So that's exciting. If there are any questions.
Questions for Mark? Okay, public arts. Got a report, Kim?
Yeah, just a brief update. So the committee met a couple of weeks ago and kind of outlined what our potential goals for 2022 would be. And right now the thought is to have one kind of larger project. Think the side of Hot Springs Boulevard Bridge, the water tank on Reservoir Hill, something a little bit more wow factor. Not saying that our current projects are not wow factors, but a bigger scale. And so thinking about allocating any funds towards a larger project.
Okay. Any questions? Well, we hear good reports about the art.
More art everywhere.
I like it.
All right, Combined Parks and Recreation Advisory Board.
Oh, I didn't know you were going to ask me about that. We were going to skip over it.
Oh,
That's why I shared the Mesa Canyon thing early.
Excited.
I do have a few more things to share about what that board's been doing. And some of it is just the highlights that Darren Lewis, the Parks and Rec director, shared about what staff has been doing this summer. A lot of it is maintenance. He did a lot this summer, but some of the things that they have been continuing to do is the landscaping on the town maintenance facility. That was something that they've been doing in-house, which is coming along nice. Something that I found really interesting is that with the discussions that we've heard around the folk festival and all of that, that by the ticket sales numbers, this season's festival was equally as well attended as previous years, which I thought was interesting. So that's kind of it as far as, otherwise it's just like budget talk, just like we'll be entering into here pretty soon and trying to get things ready, winding down summer and get ready for winter.
Any questions?
I'd like to make a quick comment. I already told this to Darren, but that new grass up there for the festival meadow is marvelous. It was such a beautiful festival this year. Kids rolling down the hill in the grass. It was lovely. Anyway.
Wonderful. Okay. I am going to not steal Jenny's thunder. If we could promote Jenny for the report for Region 9 and also the lodger's tax report. I noticed her report had anything that I would say about the tourism board, so.
Good evening, Council. I'm a little disappointed I'm not on camera this evening because I'm at a conference in Steamboat sitting on the floor in the hallway where I can charge my computer and have Wi-Fi. So I'm sure it'd be quite the sight. Anyway, so Region 9, I'm actually here with a couple of members of the Region 9 staff and to Matt's comment about the new CDC director, I've had a chance to meet that individual and have had multiple discussions. And I know that they are very excited about the opportunity in the community. So not to give away who the new hire is. I almost created a new chart for Region 9 to track the data that we see on a monthly basis on the number of loan inquiries, enterprise zone inquiries, etc. So that'll likely be included in my next Region 9 report so that we have more of a history of what the interaction from Archuleta County with Region 9 and all of the opportunities they offer our area businesses. So stay tuned on that one. But I don't have anything else to add right now. If you guys have any questions on that.
Any questions? Okay. Thank you, Jen. How about the lodging tax report?
All right. So as far as lodging tax goes, I think there's quite a bit of information included in the report, and just given the sake of the length of your meeting this evening, the one thing I want to touch on is just the holiday festivities that we are working on, and currently we are soliciting businesses and residential properties to participate in this year's lighting contest. So I will make sure to send that information to be able to sign up to anyone interested. We are starting to advertise that through local media sources. The Chamber will help us advertise that as well. I sent an email out to all last year's participants, but the deadline to participate in the lighting contest is November 17th, end of day. And then you're going to see a couple of things pop up in the next couple of weeks. Santa's workshop is going to come to fruition once again, and that will be outside of the visitor center this year. And Shari, Pierce, and her husband they have some amazing ideas, and I think it's just going to be incredible. And that's we have a lot of fun festivities in the works. There will be an event on December 18th. It's Old-Fashioned Christmas. It's basically a walking parade, and at this point we have 12 area businesses or nonprofits that have adopted segments of the route, and so that we'll have more information on that probably in the next month, so that we can encourage locals to attend that event. But that should be a very festive event for the evening, and hopefully I can schedule just a nice light snow that creates ambiance and is not a hindrance to the actual walking part of the parade. So I will answer any questions you guys have, and I look forward to listening to the rest of the discussion this evening.
Any questions for Jen? I guess not. So, let's move on now to the August sales tax report. Andrea?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So at the time that I put this report together, I had preliminary numbers. They had not been confirmed by the county. So we did just get this the other day after we had published the packet. So the number that the county reported for total sales tax between town and county is $1,544,973, rounded up. The town's portion of that would be $771,166. I had reported in here $771,913, so it's really just a little bit, about $800 off from what's in here. Of course, we split that equally, so that would be $385,583 going to the general fund and the same to the capital improvement fund. That does represent a 9.1% increase over the same month in 2020. And so far, year to date, we are 38% above what we had originally budgeted for sales tax revenues. If you recall, we did adjust our budget revenue projections, and we are on track to hit that. We did increase it by 22%. So as long as we bring in a minimum of what we had budgeted for the remaining months of the year, we should be on target to hit that increased revenue estimate. So I will try to answer any questions that you have.
Any questions, Brent? Okay. Thank you. Okay, I might just encourage the public that if you want more information on what the town's doing, then on our website, you can go to the other department reports and check on them. There's a lot of stuff that's happening. Okay, let's go on down to new business. Martin? Resolution 2021-17, adopting revised rules and regulations for Hilltop Cemetery.
Evening, Council. This is a continuation of the conversation we had at the last meeting about the cemetery rules and regulations and edits that the town staff felt were needed or made sense in order to clarify the document. We have attached a new red line version that includes the comments from council clarifying what perpetual maintenance means, what it accomplishes, and that it is in fact a one-time payment. And we clarified what decorations were with a definition and what the decorations were allowable. And then we had added a section 10.3 for tours and events, so that there was something clear in there for people that would want to have either an event or a tour in the area and what would be expected of them. And to be clear, we haven't had that request yet, but putting in something so that we have recourse if something happens is what's in there. And then the change based on legal review by Clayton Buchner was to change the trespassing language that was utilized in the document to make it simpler and more clear on what trespassing would mean. Other than that, it is the same. The other changes are the same that we brought forward previously. There's been some time to think about what we brought forward, and I'd be open for any questions about any of the changes.
Okay, go ahead.
I have a question about the section here that's the definition of a resident. And I'm confused. This is resident is a person for whom it can be confirmed resided or owned property in the town or county for a period exceeding 6 months immediately prior to death. I understand that part. Then it says also applies to the immediate family members of the plot owner. So if I have a plot and I die here, but my brother lives in Texas, does that mean, what does that mean?
So in the document, it does speak to who the immediate family members are. have to scroll to find which section that is, but it does talk about being able to bury immediate family members, so grandparents, great-grandparents, children, brother, sister, something like that, in a plot that you have purchased.
I see.
This also covers a concern that maybe your child is at college and passes away and hasn't been living here and has been attending college and another school, but you want to bury them in Pagosa Springs because that's your home, right? But they're not living here. And so that was how that kind of situation was covered in this document.
All right, so thank you, that clarifies that. I have one other question that's not directly related to this, but on planning commission, we discussed at one time having a residency requirement. We were talking about having a different fee structure for short-term rentals for residents versus owners, or resident owners versus non-resident owners. And the opinion at the time was that we essentially could not determine residency in the state of Colorado, so we weren't allowed to make that recommendation to council, which makes me question every time I see the word resident or residency requirement in anything. I wonder why we can do it there, but we couldn't do it in that short-term rental situation. I don't know that we need to get into that here, but it's something that puzzles me. So, but let's address that later. But that really puzzles me. So anyway, that's all.
This is common terminology that you see in a lot of these rules and regulations for cemeteries. Kathy and I were speaking about this section, and she was struggling to remember a non-resident that had applied to be buried in the cemetery. So it is extremely rare.
Yeah, I understand.
So.
Section 5.1. Do you want, and it says that the immediate family members are parents, siblings, children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren, whether by birth or by adoption. So for this specific reference.
Thank you, that's all.
Okay. So, any discussion on this?
Sure.
Sure.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank staff for seeking out information about the tours and clarifying that. I think you did it in a respectful way. Appreciate that.
And I think in the review that I did, I couldn't find anything in here that you missed of what we talked about. So I thought that all the staff who worked on this did a super job.
May I make a motion?
Go ahead.
Mr. Mayor, I move to approve resolution 2021-17, adopting revised rules and regulations for Hilltop Cemetery.
Second.
We got a motion and a second. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Let's go on down to a discussion about adopting revised rules and regulations about a ban on single-use plastic bags and polystyrene containers, and states House Bill 21-1162. And so, Andrea, you want to fill us in on this bill?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. This item was requested for discussion by town council members. So just as a bit of background, House Bill 21-1162 was signed by the governor and went into effect in July. And this is statewide legislation that would phase out single-use plastic bags and polystyrene containers, like the foam containers that you get when you get to-go meals and things like that. So parts of the bill included removing a statutory preemption or prohibition on local government's ability to implement their own regulations regarding plastics. And then it also phases out over the next couple of years the use of those single-use foam containers and bags. So beginning in January 2023, under the statewide law, there will be a 10-cent fee imposed on paper and plastic bags throughout the state. Starting in January 2024, the plastic bags then would be banned at most stores. Those stores and restaurants can still use whatever surplus of plastic bags they may already have on hand, but really it is intended to phase it out over time. And then starting in July of 2024, local governments are allowed to impose stricter rules on plastic. So with that 10-cent bag fee that would start in January 2023, 60% of those revenues would come back to the municipality or county in which that store or restaurant is located within. The other 40% would go back to that retailer. Now, there are some exceptions in this act, so it would not apply for people who are enrolled in state or federal food assistance programs. They would not have to pay that fee. Restaurants and retailers that have 3 or fewer stores or restaurants within the state and are not franchises would be exempt from this act and can continue to use those containers and plastic bags unless they are prohibited by the local government. And then there's some other exceptions like pharmacies, dry cleaners, farmers and roadside markets and bulk stores can continue to use plastic bags. And then plastic bags can also be used to wrap frozen food, meat, seafood, plants, and other things that would otherwise contaminate other items within the parcel. So I did include some information in here, including the act that was, or the House bill that was signed into law. I don't know if council wants to take any further action on this, but I did want to bring it to your attention that this is a statewide law that will be going into effect over the next couple of years. So I don't know, Clay, if there's anything you wanted to add on it, just in terms of local governments and what they can do under this new law, or?
Yeah, I'll add something real quick. On its face, it looks like the exemption, or the preemption, I should say, that prohibits local government from regulating the use or sale of plastic materials was lifted. And then there's some questions to the language that says you have to wait until July 24 for more stringent application. And so, on its face, the interpretation looks like, well, we can implement a plastic bag law now. However, by the appearance of the legislative minutes and the staff notes, it looks like, because of the way that it was, the effective date example marker states that it did take effect on July 6, 2021, and then internal to the statute is this rollout timeline, right? And in 2023, we start collecting fees. In 2024, we do this. And so people are saying, well, then we, as a local government, we can, we can start our own plastic bag ban. But the notes and the effective date say that even though the repeal was on July 6, 2021 of that particular preemption, that it doesn't apply to local governments regulating use or sale of plastic materials, which wouldn't take effect until July 1st, 2024. And so I think they are clarifying what they meant by that section that says more stringent. What they're really saying is this is a state statute rollout, and if you want to, you have to kind of go along with it. You're going to get money for it because you're going to be affected by administrating it. But before that, you're just going to have to wait until July 2024 if you want to make more stringent rules, like say a complete plastic ban or whatever.
Okay, any questions? Any discussion?
So there's basically nothing to do now, right? Is that right?
Now we're waiting until 2023 to start collecting in the budget.
Yeah.
Okay, is that pretty much all the discussion on that?
That's about all we can have. But thank you for putting that together.
I appreciate having you. Okay.
Can I just maybe
Go ahead.
make a suggestion that the ballot questions is probably going to be one of the longer things we discussed tonight. If there's anybody waiting for the ones following, should we maybe move that to last so that people don't have to wait to do that unless, of course, they want to? I'd like for them to, but just a possibility.
I think that's a reasonable suggestion. And that is the issue about Spring Street paving.
in early childhood.
And I don't know if there's anybody here to speak to that except just staff.
No one's here.
So I don't think there's anybody else. We inconvenience staff a lot.
That's fine.
Councilmember Pitcher has joined and she had her hand raised. Not sure.
Yeah, I was just, hello, sorry I'm late. I have a very limited availability. I'm actually taking care of my brother right now, and so I did just call in to do this, to talk about the ballots and the bags, but, you know, if we need to move the other ones, that's okay, but I want to put that out there, but I probably have about 30 minutes that I can be away.
Okay.
Are we trying my comment?
So let's go ahead and talk about the possible ballot question for upcoming elections. Andrea?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor and Town Council. So the purpose of this item this evening is for council to discuss a whole list of potential ballot questions for either the upcoming municipal election, which would be on April 5th, I believe, of 2022, or perhaps a countywide election, which would be in November of 2022. As some of you are aware, there have been some proposals that have come forward regarding use of lodging tax or even an excise tax on short-term rentals to provide an ongoing funding stream for workforce housing. Some of those items were discussed at your annual retreat in July. There's also some other options that have come forward related to developing a long-term funding stream, such as an additional sales tax allocation. I think there's some interest in that from the county. Potentially a property tax. There could be a nightly fee on vacation rentals. A housing linkage fee was discussed at one point when council was looking at our impact fees. Real estate transfer tax is currently not allowed per state statute. However, there are some groups proposing this change in the future. The Urban Renewal Authority is certainly a potential way to generate potential workforce housing that is paid for by future tax revenues from commercial development. And then a marijuana per transaction fee or other type of local tax or occupational tax on marijuana could also be a source of funding. So along with those funding streams, there are also a few questions that have been put forward by council members as to the operations of town council. And those would need to be charter amendments. We would need to refer those to the electorate. First of all, I believe Councilmember Pierce wanted the council to discuss whether the number of council members should be reduced from 6 plus the mayor to 4 plus the mayor to make a total of 5 members on the town council. Another question that has been kind of tossed around is the amount of compensation for the mayor and council members. Currently, it's $200 per month for council members and $300 for the mayor. So I guess within those two items, discussion and direction is desired by staff so that we know whether to bring forward additional information and whether you would like to see an ordinance so that you could then put that on the ballot for the municipal election. Going into lodging tax, so one of the proposals is to reallocate some of the funding within those existing tax receipts. This ballot measure goes back to 2006, and just as a reminder, the town's tax is 4.9% on all types of lodging, including short-term rentals, hotels, bed and breakfast, everything. The county's is 1.9%. Our municipal code does have an entire article related to the legislative intent of that lodging tax and how it should be spent. There is also an IGA between the town and county that dates back to when these were implemented as to how the tourism board would be structured and how those funds would be used. The proposal that has come forward from some citizens is to utilize a percentage of the town's tax revenue for workforce housing. I do want to just point out that the proposed budget, which was introduced to you in early October, does include an infrastructure line item in the tourism budget, and that is $500,000 for 2022. Now that's subject to council's approval, but that could be utilized for workforce housing types of projects, along with assistance for other projects that benefit visitors and residents alike. So trails, signage, river access, pickleball, what have you. It has been a contributing source of funds to match town and county other funding for different projects. I guess I would suggest that, if council does feel that lodging taxes should be reallocated, it may be beneficial to have a discussion with the tourism board about that, since one of their charges is to make recommendations as to how those funds are used. Also with lodging tax, another proposal that has been potentially discussed is to increase the amount of the town's lodging tax. My understanding is that the county, as a statutory county, is limited in the amount that they can charge per state statute. It's 1.9%. However, April did confirm that it's actually 2%. There was a 0.1% that for some reason was not collected, and that rule expired in 2020. So now it's actually 2% is the full amount going forward. So that would require, as an additional tax, if the council wanted to go that route, that would be a voter a ballot question in terms of increasing that tax rate. Sales tax is another possibility, and as everyone I think is aware, we share our sales tax equally with the county. It's currently 4%, state is 2.9%. Sales tax is of course paid by visitors and residents alike. That could be a question that could be posed potentially to town voters, but it may make more sense, since that is a county-wide sales tax, to put it to the entire county. So I guess we would need some clarification from the council if you're interested in going that route, and I think it would be beneficial to have some communications with the county on that to see if they would be on board with something like that, and then also for how much, and whether there was a sunset period, what the uses could be. Would it just be for workforce housing, or could it be for other types of projects? The excise tax on vacation rentals, there have been some communities, such as the town of Crescent View, that have put in place, after voter approval, an excise tax, which is on specific goods. So this could be placed on short-term rentals with funds dedicated to workforce housing. Again, it might be more beneficial to make this a county-wide vote if this is the direction council wants to go. The county has a lot more vacation rentals than the town does. We have about 150 within the town, and I don't know the exact breakdown, but a good portion of those are homeowner occupied, which I understand would be an exemption within this. So if we're talking just about town, excise tax on short-term rentals, I don't know how much that could potentially bring in. Property tax is an interesting one. I don't know if most of the public is aware, but the town's property tax is incredibly low. Our mills are 1.557, which yields $96,000 a year. This is a very low amount compared to the amount of property tax that's collected by the county and other special districts. So sales tax really is our main source of funding. It's 88% of our revenue in the general fund. But that is a possibility. However, then you are charging the individuals that live here and own property. Other possible revenue streams, and this is not an exhaustive list, this is just some of the ideas that that have been raised in the past and that other communities have done. You could potentially do a nightly fee on vacation rentals. So it could be a per night fee, a flat fee on STRs. This could be based on, I think, a pillow fee is what the attorney referred to it as. And it's basically a flat fee per night. The housing linkage fee, if you recall, when council was looking at the impact fees that the town used to collect, and council did vote to no longer collect those in 2019. One of the options that Economic and Planning Systems, who was our consultant, brought forward was a housing linkage fee. This would require a nexus study, but it essentially requires that new development pay for the impact of employee housing. So it could be charged on commercial as well as residential, but that would require a nexus study in order to establish that. The real estate transfer tax, again, it's really something that different entities throughout the state, because of our housing crisis, are lobbying for. We used to have this in Colorado, and there are some communities that were grandfathered in before the real estate transfer tax was prohibited, and it has become a very significant funding source for some of those communities. So just wanted to put that out there. There really isn't anything that we can do about that right now, other than lending support for those statewide lobbying efforts to change that. Again, the Urban Renewal Authority. This was discussed at the Urban Renewal Authority board meeting a couple of weeks ago. One of the ideas with this is to potentially ask voters who had approved an amendment to the town charter whether they would be interested in creating an exception for projects that have a workforce housing component, or to raise the cap from $1 million to something higher. That could help create some opportunities for workforce housing within those projects, and without costing taxpayers anything. I think everyone's aware of how tax increment financing works, but essentially the project itself creates its own future tax revenues, which can then be pledged for that workforce housing. A marijuana per transaction fee, or a local tax. Seems like everyone's going after marijuana these days. Proposition 119 is a statewide initiative that is going to be on the ballot this November, and that would increase the recreational marijuana taxes with funds going towards education. Some communities have implemented a additional tax or even a flat fee per transaction. For instance, in the town of Memphis, that $3 per transaction yields $250,000 a year. They've been using it to supplement their marshal's office for vehicles and other equipment, which, but I do think it could be utilized kind of really for whatever council might determine. So could be for workforce housing. So again, we're just kind of looking for some direction from council on where you would like to go with these different options, and there may be other options that are not noted here. We do have an election calendar that's included in your packet for reference leading up to the April 5th election for the town. Obviously, if it's a countywide question, that would be a different timeline leading up to November. Also included in your packet is the memorandum from Collins, Cockle, and Cole, the town's prior legal counsel, about some specific affordable housing funding options, and that, in his opinion, on the validity of those different options that at the time we had asked him about. So I will try to answer any questions that you have. I know it's a lot of information. Maybe something that would be helpful is after you have discussion in general, in terms of getting direction on these different potential questions, we might kind of go down the line, if that would be helpful, after you have some general discussion, just so that we know where you'd like to go on these specific things.
I've got a question. Based on our budget and based on what we like to do with affordable housing from the study, or workforce housing, affordable housing, from the study that we received, what do you think a total amount of town contribution should be, town taxpayers' contribution should be? I mean, we can do all of these. I don't know which would pass, if any, but, or we could just do some of them. And I'm just trying to figure out what would be a reasonable number of initiatives. I guess that's my question. Anybody? Go ahead.
I have kind of an idea on that, and I think that's exactly the right place to start, is thinking, what are we going to do, how much will it cost, and then you look at income streams, revenue to feed that. But, so in the South Yamaguchi study, our consultant there did a workforce housing study as part of that, because they were considering workforce housing in South Yamaguchi. One of the things that stood out to me, and I know there are others and there are other numbers, but this is the one that really, for some reason, I remember. They said that we needed about 35 workforce housing new dwelling units per year just to keep up with the growth in the workforce we needed for the next 10 years. So I took that and did some assumptions here, and it's kind of enlightening to give us a scale. So if we assume 50 new dwelling units per year for 10 years, which will yield 500 units in a town that has about 900 dwelling units, so think about that. And if there are 1,500 square feet per dwelling unit, which is arguable, $350 per square foot, which is roughly what the project across the street costs, or whichever way, I'm disoriented here. Then that total cost comes out just shy of $9 million a year. Now, if we take some of the recommendations of, for instance, Mark Weiler to leverage that money, we can get a leverage of probably nearly 8 to 10 to 1, which means if we have $1 million in seed money, we can lever that up to perhaps $8 million in actual money, and that's levered by foundation grants, by government grants, and by low-interest, long-term government secured interest loans. So all of those things will allow you to leverage that seed money. And that's, to me, that's kind of a context, the large context of what we're working on. Now, if we do that, we got to figure out how to execute it, which is not going to be easy, I don't think, because I don't know how to do it. But we have to figure out how to execute all of that, how to get the money, take it, turn it into that leverage amount. And then, in my personal opinion, we should have a sunset on that after a while. It should not be in perpetuity. So that, to me, that's kind of an interesting context of the whole thing.
Okay, you said 35 units, and that's 35 units for the whole county?
Well,
population?
I think that was just the town
That was just
of.
the town population? Yeah.
I don't recall.
I think it was the town of, but that's a good question. I don't know the answer to that.
That's along the lines of what I was thinking, like 300,000, you can start to make a dent, and 500,000, start to be able to leverage some of these opportunities with the USDA loans and things.
Okay, so if we're looking at a place to start and an amount that we would like to collect to make a big dent in it, obviously we don't even know what part we're going to play, as you said. You know, are they going to be on the facilities that we sell or rent, or what? But, what is a reasonable annual amount for the town to contribute to the housing crisis that we have in our community, the county and the town?
I think minimum, the town contribution should be 500,000.
Yeah, I kind of am thinking that as well. If you look at different properties that we've acquired even over the last year, you know, that alone, if we purchase a few more properties, and that's it, that could easily eat up that 500,000. I would like for us to, engage further than just property acquisition, but 500,000
should be the goal, because some of these are variable. You know, say we were to move forward on marijuana per transaction tax. We can only guess what that may bring in, right? It could be more, it could be less, you know, but I think if we kind of have a strategy of aiming for, well, and I'm not saying that would be the only one, but like combining these different things with this goal of a certain number, I think is our best way to move forward.
I think, for sake of kind of keeping our conversation slightly organized and kind of moving through the different bullet points, can we, as Andrea suggested at the end, but right now for our discussion, just kind of move through those different points and start at the top and kind of slowly work our way down?
You find a way for town, and honestly, you're doing pretty easy on that suggestion. Yes, let's start at the top. Let's start with the
Shari does have her hand raised.
I'm pretty sure this is. Okay, go ahead. Why don't you read this one off?
Shari, what would you like to say?
Sure.
You know, workforce housing is a really hot topic right now, and it's definitely something that needs to be addressed. But I would caution that that's not the only place we need to put funds. And we're looking at road infrastructure that needs to be built and replaced. If we want to build workforce housing out into areas where there's not sewer, electric, water, there's other infrastructure that's going to need to be built in addition to the roads. Just the influx of people, we need to be looking at our police department and our recreation department. So we don't need just for that one hot issue right now. I think we need to look at what we can spread it out to. I'll stop there.
No, that's an excellent point too. We don't want to get tunnel visioned. Just one issue. Okay. So council operations, Shari brought up, or I guess a council member, potentially brought up reducing the size of council. Thoughts?
You raised your hand, so you should be able to go.
I'd like to know the reasoning behind it.
I was looking at efficiencies for the council. And I think I said last time, you know, we used to have 3 districted seats and then 3 at-large seats. And at the last election, we got rid of the districted seats. So we don't really have to have that reason to have the 3 and 3 anymore. And I think there would just be greater efficiencies for the town with fewer members. We use a lot of staff time when we're contacting them, when they have 7 of us contacting them about various things. It takes like extra time at our council meetings. The discussions are great, but do we really need 7 people to have those discussions and 5 to it as well? So that was my thought.
Go ahead.
I think of the discussions and having 7 heads collaborating is generally better than 5. But also the extra committees that we serve on. If we're down 2 council members, that burden is going to be passed on to staff even more than it already is.
Okay. Anybody else want to weigh in?
I mean, I'm in favor of keeping it as it is, just because I do like the broader representation that we see. I can see us potentially needing to revisit this if we are consistently having empty seats and having to, and not having engagement from those seeking appointment when we do have empty seats. But I think we've done a pretty good job at keeping our seats filled.
Okay. Go ahead, Rick.
I served on the planning commission for 2 years, and we had a 5-member plus 2 alternates. And I'll just say that I think we should avoid that at all costs. The alternate system just doesn't make any sense. I mean, you have to study the agenda, you participate in the discussion, but then you can't vote. I mean, it's just kind of disheartening. And I just don't see any reason to do that to anybody. So we shouldn't go to a hybrid at any cost. But I think a motivated 5, really well informed, could probably handle almost everything. And I think it's just our preference of 5 or 7.
You want to weigh in?
I would be fine with it either way. I tend to lean more with Matt and Maddie in that 7 heads are better. The more people you can bring into a discussion, I think the better the discussion. And we haven't really had much of an issue in filling those seats. So as long as people stay engaged and interested, I think we should give them a platform for participation.
And then Nicole has her hand raised as well.
Nicole, go ahead.
So I think this, we've had quite a few meetings where we're just at the level of having a quorum. So, as someone who's calling in from Alaska right now, I think it's nice to be able to, to be absent from a meeting and know that the meeting, town business can still go on. And if we went from 7 to 5, then our quorum would go from 4 to 3. So it would just be proportionally more difficult to have a quorum.
Okay. Anything else? Okay, so now we don't want to make any decisions, but we've got to give you some direction.
Well, are you gonna entertain public comment?
Yes, after we have discussion with this, yeah. I am going to entertain public comments, so.
Maybe we should wait until we have our public comment and we can add additional discussion in that direction.
Okay, we can do that.
Compensation?
When I first came onto the council, I thought it would be interesting to just kind of track my hours and whatever, and I wasn't even making minimum wage, so I gave up after like 3 or 4 months. And so I don't think any of us do this for the money. I would not be opposed to additional compensation, but I do like the idea of it being somewhat of a volunteer position.
I agree. So I like the idea of engagement happening because you care about your community and not because you're going to make a buck off of it. However, we might get a little bit more involvement if we were to compensate a little bit more. It might shift our demographic from folks that are working, full time, and those of us who have to take time off of work to make it to meetings. That's hours that we're missing, and so it would be nice to see a little bit more compensation for that regard, and we might get a little bit more engagement.
That's a really good point. About taking time off of work to attend functions hurts sometimes.
Anybody else like to weigh in? Go ahead.
If we're gonna increase it, maybe just by like a cost of living percentage like we do with the town employees or something of that nature, where it's not much, but it rises with inflation.
Right, and yeah, it doesn't, definitely nothing exorbitant. Like, I don't think that we need to be making anything too crazy, but even if you just take what a general, like consultant might charge is like 25 or $30 an hour, and then you kind of like factor that into how much time we spend at council meetings, it might get us to where council is paid $350 a month and the mayor is 500 or something. So it's not much, but just a little bit of a boost.
Go ahead, Shari.
So I'm in this school of, I don't think we need to be compensated. This is something we choose to do for our community. But I would say that if you're going for an increase, like Matt said, I would tie it to something so that you aren't continually going back to the voters asking for increases, that it just automatically happens, whatever it's tied to.
Okay. Yeah.
So maybe a different way to look at it. Well, could we offer healthcare insurance? That might motivate somebody who could otherwise get healthcare insurance, and if we could be on the town. That doesn't matter to me, it may not matter to others, but it might matter to some people who might choose to run. That's one idea. Another is, what if we had, say, $500 per meeting? We reduce it to 5 members to reduce the cost of the town, but you don't get the 500 if you don't show up, to have motivation to make a quorum. That's just an idea. And I would also like to have an option somewhere to donate what I make to something back to the town or something.
Go ahead, Shari.
I would say you have that option already.
Yeah.
And I intend to
That's what I
do.
do with my
That's
money.
what I will do with
Yeah.
mine as well.
Yeah. It's just not a formal back to
Exactly.
the town. Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. Nicole?
I was kind of thinking that, on average, it seems to be about 20 hours a month. So if you had $20 an hour, that's $400 a month. And, and then proportionally, I thought 400 for council, 600 for, mayor tied to COLA, the cost of living increases.
Okay. Now, if I remember right, when this was put before the voters before, it did pass. I think it was one vote.
One vote. Barely.
So, I think the general public is, I don't know what they feel right now as far as the demographics, but I agree with Shari. We've served a long time, just on council without any compensation, and that's just the way it was, But for others that have to work, it makes it more difficult. So I understand both sides of that coin, and I'm not gonna weigh in heavily for this council because it will affect some of you.
I feel like we should be, how many, I think you brought it up, like how much do we want to put on a ballot? And to me, this is kind of the low hanging fruit, or not the low hanging fruit, this is like the, I don't want this to overcrowd a ballot.
Right, I agree, like nobody feels that strongly that it needs to be a part of it. It would be great if we were able to get it on there, but it's not a deal breaker.
Go ahead.
I wanted to say something based on your comment, I think, Mr. Mayor, about it affecting the people on the council. Just so you're aware, so the public is aware, if you vote to increase your pay, you will never see it. Your vote, if it goes to ballot based on a town initiative, you'll never see that increase. You'll have to wait until, it'll go on a rolling basis, right? So if you increase it, then until the next go around, you will not see that increase unless you're reelected. So there's a law that just prohibits you from raising your own pay. And so everything you're talking about, and this is really important for the public to know this too, is that if you're asking to increase, you're asking to increase somebody else's chance at pay to be on council. You're not talking about yourselves, you just simply can't do it. It's possible that you can get reelected a future day after however many terms, but you cannot benefit from your own vote to increase your wages. Just so you're aware, so the public's aware of this issue.
Okay, now that's what we vote for.
No, if you put it to,
public?
no, it still has to go to the voter, but if you initiate the ballot, you cannot see the benefit of it if it's voted in.
Now, is that a fairly new law?
I don't know the date of the statute. I can find it for you.
This was instituted about 8 years ago, I think, and it went into effect as soon as it was passed, essentially.
You might have to pay back all that money, Mr. Mayor. I do believe it's fairly recent, but that's kind of the way that that's the general consensus.
Well, it makes sense.
Yeah.
And I don't necessarily disagree with that person.
Does it work in the opposite direction if we were to vote to eliminate our salary?
I don't think it matters. It's just, you just can't have a hand in changing it and benefiting or not. Basically, the way that it reads is if town council does a town initiative vote that messes with the wages, you are not going to be a principal to whatever change that is. I think it's written neutrally Again, I have to dig into it more, but that's the general idea, just so you're aware of it. Yeah.
Well, I think it's probably a low priority for one of the ballot items. I think we have higher priorities. So what's the next one?
Well, I think we can kind of talk about the next two in the same go, because they're both regarding lodging tax. So potential reallocation within existing tax receipts, and then do we want to potentially look at an additional tax or a higher tax rate?
Madeline and Shari.
Okay, so, I think you're gonna be hard pressed to get an additional tax increase on lodgers tax. I think that the reallocation of funding is something that, whether it be put through us or by initiative, or by referendum, initiative, I think that would pass quite easily. If an initiative is going out, then I want to see us at the table and participating in that ballot language with the citizens who are putting that forward.
Oh, sorry, Shari.
No, it's okay. I was just gonna ask if we should give public comment and council direction to staff on the council operations part before we moved on. But you've already moved on, so that's fine.
So my thought on reallocation is not necessarily, reallocating is not the word I would use. I would say let's get rid of the language that dedicates 50% towards external marketing, and then open up those revenues to be able to be kind of used, as Shari was saying, between workforce housing, economic development, infrastructure, and kind of a little bit more freedom. And then rely on our tourism board a little bit more heavily to allocate or make recommendations on how those funds are spent. I don't necessarily agree with the percentage tied, because I don't want to handcuff ourselves again with having to, I just don't want to find ourselves being handcuffed. We don't know what the future holds, and so I think the more flexibility that we can kind of design into our funds, especially lodgers tax, the better.
So you don't think that an increase in the lodgers tax would pass?
I don't think a tax increase, regardless of where it is gonna pass on a ballot.
I think lodgers tax would pass.
I agree with Maddie's thought of getting rid of that 50% that has to be used on external marketing, because our tourism board has built such a good marketing plan already that I don't think they need to be guided in that. I think they have a really good handle on what's going on.
Another idea has come to my attention that is interesting, and I think it would be palatable maybe for the tourism board, but instead of a percentage, then if they had an increase in their revenue, then that increase in revenue could be designated for some type of housing projects or some type of housing or infrastructure or whatever, however we want to word that. And that may be agreeable with them, and it would depend on, that way they would still be stable, if you will, but I don't know. It might be something to think about too. Because the increases that we've seen, and it's predicted that we will see continued increases if things continue as they are, which is always a big question. But then that could be a significant amount. This year, what's the projected increase?
Well, we are, I don't have 2021 in front of me, but we are, where is it? Okay. So we had originally budgeted for 2021. Of course, this was earlier in the pandemic, so we really didn't know what was going to happen. We budgeted $699. for town lodging tax, and our year-end estimate is $940. So quite a bit higher than what we had budgeted, but I think 2021 and even 2022 are anomaly years. The county revenue, we had budgeted $273, and we're estimating $460,000 for 2021 year-end.
Okay, so there's another thought. I don't know how to draft it, but go ahead.
Well, so I think that we passed the point that 50% going back into external marketing makes sense. Like, our marketing game has changed at least since 2006 when lodger's tax was adopted, is that correct?
Yeah, that was when it was adopted, and Jenny could probably give more information about our marketing efforts and how they've changed over the years, but yeah, that's when the tax was adopted.
And so by the proposal of getting rid of 50% is not saying that we shouldn't be marketing, it's just saying that we can shift that number to something that's a little bit more appropriate, and then have the flexibility if we get, a fire comes through and we need to bump up our marketing for the following season, we don't have to just stick with one amount. We have that, this year we can have a little bit more, this year we can take away from it. Because, social media, all of that has played a different role in how Pagosa is attracting visitors. So I just don't think that we need a full 50%.
Okay. Go ahead.
With if we were to do a lodging tax increase, if that money, I would like to see it dedicated specifically to workforce housing. It needs to have a home. And I feel like 7% on the business is already, considering that most of them are already paying commercial property tax as well. So 29% plus 7%, that's 30 some odd percent of just taxes on money's coming in. So that's where kind of my personal opposition to a tax increase. I'd rather see what we are already collecting and perhaps do some reallocation within that.
Okay, go ahead, Jeff.
That tax is gonna be passed on directly to the person renting the room. Like, it's not gonna be paid for by the lodgers. They'll raise their rates to cover that. If you look at the 2% that the county brings in right now, that's right in that sweet spot of $300,000 to $500,000. It's a simple math. So, I think somewhere in between the reallocation and a small increase, is kind of what I'm
Okay.
So I talked to a few financial people, bankers, trying to get my head around this, especially the leverage. To me, leverage is really crucial to this. Every tax dollar we bring in and spend, I would really like it to get $4 or $6 or $8 out of that if at all possible. And one of the elements that's crucial to that is having a dedicated income stream that is longer than we can only budget for a year at a time. We can't tie the hands of next year's council. But if we set up a tax like that and say that it has to be dedicated and used for this for 10 years or however we care to state it, then that gives confidence to a lender, a banker, to know that there's enough income stream to cover their note, and they'll give you much lower interest rate, and you get a lot more leverage out of your dollar. So that dedication that's not coming from us, but is coming from the voters, is really crucial about getting that high leverage of the dollar.
Okay. Nicole, did you want to weigh in?
I think this is probably one of the things I get approached about. It's one of the top couple of issues that people want to talk about, which is they want to turn off the marketing of Pagosa, where our services aren't able to adequately provide for that here. So why would we bring more people in, is what I feel like I hear the most. So I would kind of be with DeGuise and not saying, I don't really want to ask for more money, but I don't like the idea I've read through that memo again from Bob Cole. I don't really like the idea of, well, hey, we can kind of just use it for other things anyways, because I feel like when people voted for it, they specifically said, you know, we want it to go for, to increase tourism. So I think,
We lost her.
Alaska's gone. Oh, she's back.
sorry, do I still have the mic?
Yes.
You cut out right when you were about to tell us what you
think. Okay, to get to the point, I think that we should just put it out there to the voters. Do you think that lodger's tax should be reallocated for affordable housing? Just, that's what I think it should be, that straightforward.
Well, when it was put to the voters the first time, obviously, it was a pretty clear indication of what the town voters wanted to see with lodger's tax. And so, you know, to change that, would it be appropriate, like Nicole said, to take it back to the voters?
I think it certainly is appropriate, but I think that's a big open question. Do you think lodger's tax should be reallocated? I think there should be some metric associated with that in some way, some you know, guidance almost, or kind of like a roadmap of what we're thinking instead of keeping it so general.
Well, a specific percentage, like Jeff was saying, because then we have a number that we can base decisions on. But I still think it's appropriate to get rid of the 50% thing as part of that. Ask the voters if we can get rid of that, so it frees up our tourism board to make more decisions.
One thing I think is crucial on workforce housing is it not be a perpetual dedication of income stream, because eventually the market will correct, and we, the people, won't need to be doing that at least so much anymore. So even though I'm arguing for dedication, I don't want to argue for perpetual dedication. There needs to be a sunset, or something happens after a period of time when it, you know what I mean, we're not handcuffed.
Right, and I agree with that. There should be some sort of sunset if we are going to allocate a certain percentage, because like, the point was, lodgers, or people when they voted for lodger's tax in 2006 had no idea that we would be in the position that we are today. So I don't want to have this discussion in 15 more years when it's too late for us to start changing around where our monies are going. If we're just pumping money into this account that we can't spend, or, you know, whatever, we need to bump it up, whatever the case may be, I think we just need to have a benchmark or a sunset.
Yeah.
Well, I think we need to, one way or another, we need to come to an agreement and do this, because if we don't, we are going to be handcuffed, and there will be a ballot measure on the ballot that we don't have to see.
I'm going to push for a perpetual funding stream for workforce housing. And it may not be the $1 million a year, but I think it's important that we have monies that continually go towards that effort indefinitely.
Okay, so we're going through each of these options individually, and each one we talk about the benefits, the advantages, and the disadvantages. But if we look at the whole picture of all these, I guess two questions. One would be, these all can't go on a ballot. It makes it too confusing for the voters, and it's asking them for a tax here, a tax here, a tax here, and it's easy to just go no more taxes. Got enough. That's my opinion. So we need to decide which of these are going to be most beneficial and most accepted by the public, whether it goes to a vote or whether we are able to do something ourselves by legislative decision. So, which of these that we have do you think are the best ideas from your perspective right now? Looking at the whole picture, which do you think would be the best?
Well, I'm gonna respond oppositely, and I think the sales tax increase is the worst.
Agreed.
Do you think sales tax increase is worse?
I think that's the least chance of passing. And it also is paid for mostly by our community and not people.
Well, and the other part of that is, I think if you want to look at that, that needs to be a discussion with the county and not something done just on the town level. So I think that one could easily come up.
Maybe a non-starter.
Okay, so essentially, is there pretty much consensus that sales tax is not an option?
Yep, sales tax is not an option.
I will offer a different point of view. I think sales tax is the best option because I think this is a problem that affects every single person in the town. We're becoming a dysfunctional town because we don't have workers. When you can't have somebody to fix your roof or repair your tire, I mean, that makes this a pretty sorry place to live. And we're approaching dysfunction because of that. It's a problem that every single resident and visitor to this town experiences. The best way to pay for something that affects everybody is to have a tax that affects everybody, which is the sales tax. And I'll also argue against perpetual because there's a moral hazard there that's pretty interesting. So imagine if you have a business, you come into town with a business, you think, well, I don't have to pay these employees enough to find housing, the government will take care of them. Well, if there's a 10-year sunset, then they know that, well, at the end of 10 years, that's not gonna happen anymore. And I've got to get my house in order to figure out how to have employees. So I got to step up to the plate. But if it's perpetual, then I never have to worry about that. So the free enterprise never steps back up to meet the problem. So that's why I want the sunset amendment, because of that moral hazard.
So have we had, you mentioned that the county was discussing a potential sales tax.
I have just heard that there's at least one commissioner that would be in favor of a sales tax question that could go towards workforce housing and potentially other things.
Well, and maybe that could be a, whatever percentage, 0.5%, 1% for 10 years dedicated towards workforce housing and associated infrastructure.
The advantage is Jeff pointed out, sales taxes are going to generate the most amount of money. And it also potentially is a different ballot than our April election.
Nicole does the review.
Nicole?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I have to get going, but I just wanted to weigh in that I think the two items that I would most want to see on the ballot would be that would be to the reallocation of the tourism fund and also the excise tax on short-term rentals. I thought a lot about the Urban Renewal Authority after that discussion we had, and I totally appreciate Clayton's suggestion for having kind of a loophole to get around, asking voters if there should be a loophole for workforce housing, but I still think that undermines the fundamental intent of that ballot measure, or that referendum, which is that if we're going to have this major, if we're going to, I don't know if subsidize is probably not the right word, but it is kind of right word with increment financing, that people want to have a say in it. So I still think that I don't really agree with that URA funding. I also don't think that we should put anything more on the backs of the marijuana businesses. I mean, it's already incredibly taxed. And I don't see a real correlation between the problem we're trying to solve and, the vice of marijuana.
Okay. Go ahead, Matt.
I agree with Nicole. Excise tax is something that I think we can, well, first of all, a good point was brought up, like the April election, that's us and us alone. So if there any of these issues require or should require us to engage the county, now we're talking about November, so we can just focus on the stuff that we can do for April and deal with the November later. And the stuff that we can do is the excise tax. Although it could be argued that the county should participate in that as well, and then the lodger's tax. I'm not in favor of us touching the property tax, simply because as it stands, yeah, it's low and it generates $96,000 a year. If we asked the voters to double their property tax, it would give us, $96,000 a year to use. But I can't see anyone volunteering to double their property tax on the ballot.
Okay. Where are we?
But on sales tax, if we made a town initiative, the county could potentially follow suit and follow up to catch up with us on that.
Depends on the state or how much they can charge for the, no, was that lodger's tax? No, sales tax, county.
We have a countywide sales tax, and the lodging tax that the county has is statutorily limited to 2%.
That's statutory.
Okay.
Sorry.
So then, sounds like we should probably, reasonably speaking, we're looking at lodger tax and potential excise tax, short-term rentals as being ballot initiatives in April. Should we hear from the public?
I would like to say something about excise tax before you do that. I think that needs to come off of the April ask, and I think we need to engage with the commissioners about that. If we do that, we're essentially only doing it on the rentals in town, and we're putting on the backs of those people providing workforce housing for anyone who lives here, not necessarily just town residents. So I think that's something that if you want to visit it, it would have much more impact if it were countywide versus town. And I just don't want to put that burden on only the town residents to pay for the workforce housing improvements.
I agree with that. Also about the excise tax, there's talk at the state level about changing the way that property taxes are done so that a short-term rental would become a commercial entity and be taxed at commercial rates. And I would argue that if we put an excise tax on the ballot, that there should be some language in there that if the state changes their law or regulations to begin taxing short-term rentals at the commercial rate, then that excise tax should stop, because that becomes kind of a form of double taxation.
Somebody else? Okay, let's make sure we get through the rest of these options.
Well, I think we've kind of touched on a lot of them. I think we kind of have an idea of what we want to pursue for ballot initiatives.
Well, I think we've heard some disagreement on some. And so it's not clearly out, this is one we need to go after. So we need to figure out how to make a decision. First of all, I'll tell you what, let's just narrow it down to 2 or 3. Which are the 2 or 3 revenue generating possibilities would you think we should go after? And we'll just start with this end.
Reallocating of the lodging tax
Okay.
and additional lodging
That's the top one.
tax. Well, and then additional increase in lodging
Increase in lodging tax, and what about the other one?
tax. The reallocation.
Reallocation.
Specifically for April.
For April. Okay, start down the other end. Sure.
I'm just not really in favor of asking for increases to taxes right now. I would be interested in investigating, looking at the lodging tax, how it is now, and see if we can rework it in some manner to allow greater flexibility with how the tourism committee would recommend that that be spent. I don't really want to put reins on them as to how they can spend the money, but I would rather engage in conversations with them of how we might work together to spend those funds. Definitely I'm against the sales tax and excise taxes at this time. I know we talked a lot about the Urban Renewal Authority, and we still have Jeff and I want to work with staff and other people to talk about that. So I'd like to keep it on the table until after we have those discussions.
Okay. So, back to you, Maddie.
Rogers tax. I'd like to discuss reallocation and what that looks like.
Okay. Jeff?
Lodger's tax reallocation and increase. I'm not really in favor of an excise tax. I feel like we're beating up on short-term rentals lately, and I don't know. I want to take a breath for a while and leave them alone other than for a bit. And then in November, sales tax increase dedicated to workforce housing.
Okay.
Reallocation of lodgers tax. And, I think I could buy into the increase of the lodgers tax as well. But I agree with you that the excise tax, I think anything with short-term rentals, we need to be on the same page with the county. Because that will give the greatest community benefit. And the excise tax, or the excise tax, or sales tax, like any of that stuff, because we hear it all the time, right? Like, we are the town of, but we are all Pagosa Springs, and so I want these efforts to resonate through the entire community as much as possible.
Okay. So, leaves it with me. I don't think we didn't do any of them, and just I'm not opposed to looking at the reallocation of the lodgers tax, increasing it. I tend to agree with what has been said about that's not gonna. I don't know if I like that or not, but I really do like the idea of when we have good lodgers tax revenue, then we do something with that extra. And that could be pretty long term, but I would definitely want a wording on the ballot language. I think that we need to have a lot of input on that. So, and we can't do anything tonight. So that's a special process that has to go through, and we are all on a tight schedule if we want to get that on the ballot. Whether it's a petition led initiative or whether it's a council, we put it forward. So, any other discussion on anything else?
Yeah, just on that, it sounds like we're pretty much all in agreement about the reallocation of lodgers tax. I would just ask that we engage with the citizen initiative and find out what they're thinking, what they're wanting before I would like this to be a council-led thing, but I'd like to know what the pulse is of the community, and I think those folks would be the best ones to pick their brain on and come up with like how we want that to look. And I'd be happy to be the council liaison for that process. So I think it's important that we lead on this as much as possible.
Okay, I like that. The other one that we had talked about in our URA meeting was putting something on the ballot for some kind of initiative, some kind of change to make that more attractive for developers. And what we decided to do is get with a number of different folks and talk about that. So as far as getting on the ballot for April, that until to have those discussions. I don't know when that could be done. So,
We haven't met yet, so I don't know where we are with it. So if we could just keep it there until until Councilmember Posey and I have a chance to sit with staff and the other group from the Citizen Initiative and just see what those thoughts are, and then make the decision after that. If we have time or not.
Can we ask that happens next week, maybe?
Okay.
Let's do it.
okay,
We just have to see what staff time and
Yes,
council time
yes,
is. then.
yes, of course.
okay. Well, I work in a short period of time.
Were we
but-
going to take any public comment regarding?
We are.
Okay.
We're not gonna move on right now.
All right, thank you.
Thanks for catching me now.
And
We're
just,
gonna open this-
oh, sorry, I interrupted you, but just to be clear with everybody, like, when we're talking about lodger's tax reallocation, we're talking about the town's 4.9%. Right, the county can, their 1.9 is not something that we have any power over.
So,
Thank you.
okay. So, anybody want to make public comment on this issue? Lots of information. So we'll just go ladies first. I'm sorry, that's the way I usually do it. And just name is all we need.
Lori Garrity, commercial business owner at 286 Pagosa Street. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to speak, because my first note here is that I skipped a surprise party for a really close friend. So if I didn't get to speak, I just really upset. So I read through all this stuff. I sit on the tourism board. I have sat on the tourism board for a long time. We put in a lot of hours, not the kind of hours you guys put in, but I appreciate your thoughtful discussion on your salary and see it, everybody's point in that both ways. These volunteer positions are tough, and you miss things like parties and things when you volunteer. So I appreciate what you guys do, and I appreciate that thoughtful discussion on that. I will tell you that I firmly believe there's going to be a lodging tax decrease in 2022. I think our numbers were up partially because from January to May, families and remote workers could be here, and I think it was crazy. And I don't think we're going to see a repeat of that because of kids being back in school and people being called back to work. My other concern, and you've heard me voice this before, but there are just on a weekly basis, more and more people going rogue with their rentals, and you're going to lose that tax revenue. And there's even somebody in town that I spoke to that I was shocked that told me that they're developing a rogue system, so they don't have to go in Airbnb and VRBO, so therefore they get out of the system and they go another direction. And the person that told me that actually is a property manager. I was shocked. So I don't think you're going to see the increase. I think we're going to see a decrease in that. I don't think it'll be significant, but I don't think we're going to see the trajectory that we're on. Having sat on the tourism board and watching this ebb and flow and watching what happens when there are fires and there are other things that really impact communities, like Durango was impacted, like South Fork's been impacted, I would be careful to be too stringent with how you reallocate. I think your openness that Councilmember SPierce brought about letting us have some flexibility is really important. I think an increase in lodging tax, I think the lodging tax is low. And yes, it's hard to sell taxes to the public, but I think the lodging tax is low. I would strongly look at increasing that. Something else nobody mentioned, but it's on your printout here, is the flat fees on nightly vacation rental. This is something, I'm not smart enough to do how much it would make a difference if you increase the lodging tax X%, but I can count by ones. And a flat fee on a nightly vacation rental, if anybody wanted to explore that, I'd be happy to be a part of that because I can do that kind of counting. But I think if you put the increase in revenue on the visitors and keep it away from the locals, I think that will benefit everybody. if it's the visitors that are supposedly creating the issues, then let some of that fall on them to pay. And when you increase the lodging tax, it doesn't hit the commercial business owners because they just pass that on to the people staying there. So I think those were my biggest items. And then just something that Councilmember DeGraaf said that I took a note on. When you go to the public and you say, what do you think we should do with this? Well, the public doesn't sit in endless hours of these meetings. And I think you go to the people that are involved, that understand it. That unfortunately, I wish there was a solution to that, but the public doesn't understand. It doesn't understand what it takes you guys to volunteer and give all this time and figure this stuff out. It doesn't understand what we do at the tourism board. People aren't sitting in those meetings. And when you go out and go, oh, here's what this looks like, what do you think? They have no basis to make a decision. So I think the education process falls on you guys, falls on us as a tourism board, if you're gonna go to the public and ask these questions, because they don't know. If they did, your seats would be full. So that's all I have to say.
Go ahead. Name and comment.
Name and
Name and comment.
Robert Sarah, I do live in Corona. I don't know you folks, I've only been to a few meetings. Just a comment on when we said that the town staff gets a lot of time taken up from the council members calling in. I've served on boards and we used to have a chair for each committee and only one person would ever reach the staff. That might save you some time if it works for you. Housing, that's a big issue, obviously. I think you've all addressed this in one fashion or another, but you definitely need a steady income stream for affordable housing. So however you reallocate whatever choices you make for future taxes, give a steady income stream. Councilman Posey had brought up something that he had heard, which is true. You can leverage the money, and right now there are federal programs that will leverage literally 90%. And you're looking at 4% interest rate for 40 years. So when you talk about the timing, when you talk about how to raise the money, think in terms of, yes, limiting it. Limit it to 10 years. You made various comments about how long it would take to build enough housing within the town for the town's purposes. So if it's a 10-year plan that you believe today, then allocate it for 10 years and then sunset it and then let it get revoted at the end if it needs it. I might take up one little liberty to say, factor in inflation and the amount you choose to limit or to collect. I think we will be looking at inflation. Even at a low level, we'll have some inflation. I would also strongly recommend looking at affordable housing in a fashion that it cannot go back to market rates in a future time. It should be in perpetuity. And again, there are many mechanisms to do that. The simplest one is that the town can do this. You can do it with organizations that exist, or you can create something new. But if you have a nonprofit that's going for the government finance, the government guarantee, and the government support to the bank, then it can remain in perpetuity workforce housing. It'll never revert to market rates. You won't have a developer selling it off at some point in the future. And I don't have enough knowledge of how the town runs to give you a strong opinion. But from what I've picked up a little bit, and I do serve on the board of PHP, which is where I've learned so much over the last couple of years. The short-term vacation rentals, from what I can tell, they're not paying much of the tax. So if they were paying a flat fee per bedroom, for example, that could generate a substantial amount of money. Again, it doesn't have to be a lot per year with everything else you're doing, but it could be a source that's not being taxed at all now. So you're not taking more. It's something they'll pass on. And I think it's $7 a night. If you average how many nights you think they can do a year, 200, then $1,000 to $2,000 a bedroom, it's probably not enough money to make anybody stop and think, oh, I shouldn't have bought this property to rent. And that's my 2 cents. Thank you for the time.
Anybody else want to offer to?
Inflation, please.
Veronica Medina, 340 County Road. 411, I forgot where I live.
Just on the
All right, so the discussion always, like someone said, workforce housing, workforce. It's a hot topic. It's been a hot topic. This is not new, and I think I've said this before. It's not new. This is not new. It's crazy because real estate's crazy, but going back to the tourism board, they did their job. They did their job. They used that money because guess what? We are a great town, and we have lots of tourists that come here because of what the tourism board did with those funds. And now we're mad because we have all these people here, and yet we don't have enough places for them to lay their head at night. So we're mad and we're going to tax that, which doesn't make sense. Do I think it's a possibility that you could take some of that tourism money and use it for something else, whether it be tourism or, housing or whatever? Yeah, that's a reasonable idea. But we're getting away from who are we? Who are we? What are we doing? So Pagosa Springs, we are a fill in the blank. We are a tourist town. So yes, I'm a resident. We have many residents here. We love where we live. That's why we're still here. But so are we going to beat these people that come and spend their money here over the head because they want to be here? I don't think that's logical. And when one of your other meetings you spoke about the carrot and the stick. Right now, you guys have the stick and you're beating this pretty hard. And not me personally, but there's builders that are currently building, and they are deciding right now, and the decision may have already been made and I'm just not aware, but they're talking about not continuing that development because of what town council passed, because it's affecting their sales. Not that all of those units were going to be sold as short-term rentals, because they are not. I think 2 of the 20 that they already had planned were short-term rentals. And so only 2 of those 20 pulled out. But that gave an indicator to the builder that town of Pagosa does not want builders to come and build housing here. So we need to think about the carrot and the stick and really look at what it is we're trying to do. We do need to come up with a plan because this isn't working. Exactly what we're doing is not working. So I would just caution you on taking that money and from the tourism board and looking at what we could really use it for the best use. Also, it's not just housing and workforce. There's other things that go with it, as Shari mentioned. We got to think about the big picture. It's not just one item. And I would love to see some diversity on this town council because I don't really think it represents who we are here in Pagosa Springs. And I would love for somebody really to reach out and talk to the builders locally because there's a lot of ideas and there's a lot of people looking at doing things here that feel again like town council isn't, they don't want to be a part of it, or Pagosa Springs doesn't want to be a part of what they can do to help us grow. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Go ahead.
You have some hands there.
We have 2 hands up. Okay, let's go to Wayne first and then Glenn Walsh.
Can you hear me now?
Yep, yes. Can hear you.
Okay, thank you. My wife and I live on a fixed income, and we have to balance our budget on a monthly basis and allocate funds for the projects that we want to get done throughout the year. My biggest concern with government is it just wants to tax. Why can't we live within our means? I don't understand why we have to be talking about raising taxes when we can just balance our budget and live within our means. Isn't there cuts and places we can move money that we can live within our means without burdening people with taxes because they always seem to be aggressive, and that's the reason why people don't vote. Can we just balance and live within our means, people? Thank you.
Thank you, Wayne. Thank you. Glenn Walsh. Okay, Glenn, you're still muted, buddy.
How about that?
That's good.
That's good.
Okay, good. First, not needing to be, too contrarian, but I think this board, especially this board of 7, is incredibly representative, even though a majority of you disagree with me, which happens from time to time. Just a few things, like the lodger's tax. I think those of us who were considering the lodger's tax question thought that the town council was inclined to dedicate some money from the lodger's tax to workforce housing, but wasn't really sure, even if narrow legal sense, they could do that it was kind of respecting the wishes of the voters that approved the lodger's tax and just no further ratification. So, I mean, I think in anything we've been kicking around, we've been including the up to phrase. We understand that the landscape has changed, the post-pandemic lodger's tax may change. So, we've kind of been kicking around an up to 50%. If you were to propose increasing the tax along with that up to provision, again, it would give the town council a lot of latitude. I don't think anybody was trying to tie their hands or try the TTC's hands by mandating the 50% expenditure. On the excise tax, just a couple points. One is, like a 5 to 6% excise tax in the town and county would raise over $3 million, and that's not even considering what I think everyone expects further growth in this market. And while it would be nice to work with the town, in my 20 years in Pagosa, quite often the town just has to show leadership, and then the county will follow. I think if the town voters approved a 6% excise tax, and that raised $550,000 to $650,000, I really think the county would take a very hard look. They may choose to piggyback on the industry more than to nudge it, and maybe they'll go for a different percentage, but I bet they would follow along with a healthy percentage that would raise money. So I would just ask you to show a little bit of leadership on that one, and maybe show the county the way on that issue. Also, folks whose budgets are stressed because of incredibly high rents or incredibly high mortgage payments for the prices you have to pay to live here, I think they're much less likely to vote for increasing sales tax on themselves, including sales taxes on their own food, than they are to pass, say, a 6% excise tax in short-term rentals. I could be wrong there, but I really think that's much more achievable. And just on the URA question, real brief, I'm not at all opposed to that $1 million figure is certainly not some platonic truth. It is somewhat higher and connected to affordable housing. I think folks would look at that positively, but I think first we have to define a positive funding stream. Then we have to bring them a good solid project, which might include $2 or $3 million of TIF funding along with other funding that we're considering, and say, listen, this is not a one-off. We want to bring you 10 of these over the next decade, and we don't want to run an election every year. So while approving this, but you also give us that $2 or $3 million latitude to come back next year with another project, I think that would pass too. So those are my 2 or 5 or 10 cents.
Okay, thank you, sir. Anybody else? Yeah. We've done away with giving your address to, we think, we started thinking about it.
446
check on it.
Bill Hessman. Thanks. Thank you so much. A great discussion about a very important issue. So the Planning Commission sort of initiated this for Pagosa Housing Partners, and I'm speaking as president of Pagosa Housing Partners. They encouraged you to allocate as much as possible from the lodger's tax, and they recommended that you greatly increase the fees. I like the discussion that I've heard that it's really better to do it as a tax than as a fee, and I believe that the voters should give you the permission to create this tax. A steady stream that you can bank on, as Mr. Posey said, is very important for this particular problem that we're dealing with. which is, we need money on a regular basis, but you want to match it. You want to match it with loans, you want to match it with grants. So that steady stream, if you build that into whatever you do, and it's not flexible, like, oh, the tourism board is going to make these decisions, and they'll move things around however they want. If you do that, that makes it really hard for an organization or a town to match those funds on a long-term basis. And you're talking maybe 30, 40-year loans that you need to be dealing with when you're talking about housing. This is not cheap stuff. I liked what Nicole said. Everybody I talked to when I was doing the survey for our housing, the business owners that I talked to said, we've got too much tourism, we can't even take care of our customers. Let's take a break and take some of that money out of driving more and more tourists into this town and put it into something that is pretty desperate. I agree with Glenn that we ought to lead the way. We should lead the way with the excise tax. It's going to generate $500,000-$600,000 if just the town does it. But what we suggested to you in our proposals were put in some language that if the county decides to put in an excise tax, yours goes away. It's very simple. If you can actually sit down with the commissioners and say, let's do this together, the excise tax for the town goes away. It's just built into the ballot measure. The state law is very interesting. The Commissioner Posey was talking about there's a possibility of state law. That language could also be put into the proposal, into the ordinance. That if the state law passes a tax on short-term rentals or increases their property tax, you could reconsider. The biggest bang for the buck by our calculations is going to be an excise tax. We don't want to drain, I mean, maybe Nicole wants to drain the entire tourism board of all their money. I mean, that's what it sounded like she was saying. We are not proposing that. We're just saying, let's take half of what the town generates and let the county, I mean, you know how the county's income has been growing exponentially, according to the reports that we've been seeing. It's going to the ceiling, what they're collecting out there with their 1.9%. So I'd love to see you make a definite decision that you're going to go ahead with an excise tax of some kind, or at least that you're going to meet with the people that are proposing a petition and see if we can come to a compromise on an excise tax, and see if we can come to a compromise on a lodging tax, and so that you can approve it at your next meeting. Because if you can't make a decision by your next meeting, the petitioners need to start going door to door with a petition, and that leaves you out of the discussion. And I'd rather have the council really at the driver's seat with this, because I really like the folks that are on the council. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment on this? Then back to discussion. What have we decided as far as direction for staff?
I'm still where I was prior with the lodging tax, looking at that. I'm still not in favor of the excise tax. I just don't want that burden solely on town residents. Thank you.
Okay. Matt?
I'd like to have an opportunity to vote on an ordinance about looking at a reallocation of the lodging tax and a increase in the lodging tax.
Okay.
I agree with Matt, And I guess I don't fully understand an excise tax. I guess I need to research that a little bit more. We're talking about excise tax on short-term rentals within the town alone. Is that correct? Is that what that means? I can be persuaded to do that, give it the right information, so I'm not adamantly opposed to that. But I'm also still in favor of a sales tax in concert with the county. Okay.
Yes, I would like to see information about lodger's tax reallocation / shift in verbiage regarding our code, and I would also like to see information on excise tax.
Okay. Matt?
Same, but also the, what a lodger's tax increase would look like.
Okay, so information on increase in lodger tax, relocation of the lodger's tax, reallocation of relocation. Anyway, reallocation of the lodger's tax, and then a little more information on the excise tax. And see if we could get a feel for the county on whether they want to go with the sales tax. I think that needs to be a county initiative, personally, because we divide that equally. And so I would hope that if they decided to do a county sales tax, that we as a council would be able to issue support for that. I don't think it's going to be on the November election, obviously, not one of the ballot initiatives, so it'd be a year from now.
2022.
Yeah, or 2 years from now. No, 1 year from now, yeah. November. So, is that clear enough? Go ahead, Matt.
One last thing. So I would like to be the council liaison if we're going to meet with anyone from the public, but I will not be at our next meeting. I'm just saying there's a timeline there, and I will be out of town, so I can share my thoughts or whatever with everyone, but I just physically can't be here.
So which public are you talking about?
Well, I'd like,
PHP?
yeah, I would like to engage with PHP for sure, because they're the ones that have done a lot of the work and understand a lot of the nuance of all of these issues a little bit more. And I'd like to share that with all of us, because you have questions about excise taxes, I have questions about it. I think we all have questions that stand me.
And I would maybe say, you might be referring to the petitioners and not necessarily PHP, right? The folks that are trying to put forth a citizen-led
I want to
initiative.
know, yes, I want to know what could potentially be thrown out there, or I'd like to know what could potentially be brought to the public, and see how we can make it a council-led initiative versus a petition.
And I think also that the tourism board needs to provide the input. They have been managing their money wisely under the directive they've been given by Ballot, and we have seen the benefits of their wise use of those funds. Maybe more benefit than we anticipated with all the visitors, but still I'd like to have their input.
So I'd like to ask Shari, is what Matt is proposing, is that kind of overlaps what we were going to do with the URA? Are we overworking a single issue? Should we collapse those, conflate those two?
Well, I don't think it's an overlap, because we were just going to discuss the, that one piece.
But it's kind of a similar discussion with the same people, so
yeah.
Could we do that at the same time and be more efficient? I mean, maybe you two should do that, and I should back out. We don't want to overwork something here, so I don't know.
Either way, I was going to say you guys can do it and I'll back out before you said that. So, I mean, I think the important thing is that we engage them on this issue, that we told the Urban Renewal Authority Board that we would engage them on. And then whatever this board wants to.
I kind of think it shouldn't be us working on the URA and you two working on the other one. I mean, that's kind of odd.
I have no interest in working on the URA.
Oh, you don't?
Ballot question whatsoever. No, I think it's fine just the way it is.
Okay,
Matt, I would love for you to talk to the petitioners and report back to us on your
Thank you,
findings.
I will.
All right.
Thank you.
what was I gonna say? It may come back to me, but this early stage of Alzheimer's is hard. So,
Well, I mean, it
you got
sounds-
enough direction.
I do want to just be responsive to some of the comments about engaging different entities. So are you wanting us to bring the tourism board folks in at your next meeting, or do you want to have a separate meeting with them? Along with PHP, I guess I'm not really sure what method you want to go about engaging these different folks before.
So their next meeting is gonna be beginning of November, correct? The tourism board.
I don't know off the top of my head.
Yeah, it should be the second Tuesday of the month.
Yeah.
It would be great if we could get, I mean, our next meeting will be,
November 2nd.
so still before the tourism board meets, and we should probably have a decision, or we should have something in front of us at our November 2nd meeting to be able to make a decision on for what goes on the ballot versus not. Is that kind of the
So it's
timeline
a
that we're
different
following?
timeline if it's going to be a citizen-initiated petition. They need to go out and start collecting signatures. Now, that can be happening in parallel to whatever decisions you all are making. They can always withdraw that. And also, when they present that petition to you, you guys have 30 days to make different decisions. You can adopt the ordinance that they want to put forward to the voters. So it's not like they, we're preventing them from moving forward with whatever they want to ask petitioners about. If you are still wanting to have discussions with people and figure out, what this might look like. So I don't think you need to make a decision on November 2nd, unless you feel that you want to do that.
So
but it would be November 9th would be their next meeting.
So what I would like to see from the tourism board is a letter or a statement of what they would recommend to us if we were to change the allocation. And that being, removing the 50% language or dedicating a certain percentage or whatever. Like, could they speak to that, and could they also speak to other, besides just housing? Could they speak to what other things they would want to spend money on and partner with us on, like infrastructure, economic development, stuff like that? Is that reasonable, or is that?
I can certainly relay that to the tourism board and Jenny. It might be beneficial for Jenny to present to you how those external marketing dollars are spent and, what that looks like in terms of the budget. But I guess, is that something that you all, like that letter or whatever, is that something you want on your next agenda? So they would have to have a special meeting in order to get that done in advance.
Right, so that's what I'm asking about the timeline, is because that doesn't work without them having to have a special meeting. If we want to, I think that we should hear from them in some sort of fashion on what their potential change could be, unless we just want to change it and then they can figure it out.
Well, we already have heard from them in different capacities, and they are of the belief that we should not, that money should stay with them. And so I think any questions we ask of them, we're gonna get the same response. And it'll be something, what they were in favor of was something like you were proposing, where not tax increment financing, but like, we set this baseline here, and then anything above that, sort of the cream of that would be something that we could use. We've had these discussions with them a couple different times. So I don't want to keep going back. I think I'd rather just move forward with it.
Kind of reiterate, like anything that's like, the cream off the top is not going to be considered a dedicated funding stream.
Correct.
And therefore loses that secondary value.
I think it has to be a percentage.
Okay, direction to staff.
guess that's, do you want to say you ask for a 1% or 2% increase in the lodging tax, and that new percentage is what gets dedicated to something else?
Absolutely. At least in my mind, that's what I was thinking with supporting a lodger's tax increase, was that percentage, whatever it is, 1%, 1.2, whatever, that would be specifically earmarked for workforce housing.
I agree with that.
So for the increase, the percentage increase on the ballot?
Correct. And then we can do away with the 50% handcuffs that the lodger's tax already has in place, and then allow the tourism committee to then work with their budgeted monies, which they've been great these last few years with the infrastructure projects and a lot of really like solid community-based projects. I mean, Jenny does 0 summertime advertising. You know, this is just momentum that's been generated from years of good work. And so that's my mind on that issue.
Okay.
And I know, I'm sorry, okay, one last thing, mind spark. I mean, they've said before, like they are totally in support of workforce housing and like what we're trying to do, but they just like us don't want to be told what to do. So if we can give them some latitude and some freedoms, I know they'll come along, and we can both get what we want. We can have a dedicated funding stream based on a tax increase, and they can still be in control of their budget, and hopefully we can get some commitments from them that aren't.
Okay.
That makes sense.
Go ahead.
I guess, would it be beneficial to bring the county in on this too? Because there is an IGA between the town and the county on how those lodgers' taxes will come into one pot for the tourism fund and how they would be spent. I'm wondering if having some kind of joint meeting between town, county, and the tourism board specifically about some of the reallocation language and then this idea of the excise tax would be a good meeting to have before council makes decisions on this.
I think it'd be a great meeting to have, because I think they've already made some statements, or at least some of the council members have, one of the council members has, who from the tourism board about, leaving it alone. Now, I don't know if he's got the other council as far as the funding. Now, I don't know, I would think that an increase in funding, if it was passed by the voters, would be easier to swallow than having money taken out of their budget, a percentage, taken away from what they would generate. So I don't know. It's an interesting question, but I would like to have some input, however we can do that within a timeline. Go ahead.
With this issue in the county, I think I would like to invite them into the conversation, but not hinge all of our discussion and forward progress on any action on their part.
I agree with that too.
Okay. Okay, what else, Stephanie?
Mr.
Go ahead,
Mayor.
Chair.
So when we have information brought back to us, could we find out what a 1% increase might yield?
Oh, man, that was my question. Go ahead.
And then they could use that to inform the decision if they want to do an increase or what that might be.
Just on town or countywide?
Just on the town.
Town?
I think if we take it to voters, it would just be an increase in the town.
Yeah, and
Lodging tax.
Go ahead. That's the question I was gonna ask. I could expand that a little bit, but estimated income on what we're checking into. Those issues as best we can, projection. I'd like to see what that bottom line is for a year.
Well, then you know if you want to ask for 1% or 2%.
Right, correct.
And then within that, I think it was proposed that there would be a different structure for homeowner occupied versus non-homeowner occupied, I think we're still trying to get that data, or are we close on that?
You know, we won't really know till the renewals because we have asked that question in our previous STR applications. So we are staging a renewal application. We're reformatting that so that will give us a lot more better information on who is a homeowner occupied versus non-homeowner occupied.
So we can try to get that information, and then, so for the, I guess for that joint meeting, when would you like that to occur? Prior to November 2nd, or? And I don't know when those books.
That
are
really only gives us a week.
Right.
And I know they're very much in the budget season as well.
Does it have to be a meeting of the minds? Can't it just be an invitation to comment? Hey, this is what town council is thinking. Please provide feedback.
It's up to you all. How, to what extent you want to engage your advisory boards and the county commissioners.
Essentially, it would be an invitation. It always is, you know, as far as who shows up from the county or who shows up from the town. So extended invitation and say we love it, and that's not all we can do, I think.
At our November 2nd meeting?
We were doing.
Well, I think that we're trying to put this time sensitivity on it, which is making it complicated, but I do want to keep this thing moving because I don't want to encourage, I don't want our inaction to prompt citizens to go knocking door to door if they don't have to.
So for the timeline, if I could just kind of help maybe move the discussion along, you would need a ballot, you would need to pass an ordinance for a ballot question at your last meeting in December. I mean, technically, we could inch into January, but now you're really tight. So I advise that you have a drop time of, if you're going to do ballot initiatives, and by that point, we need to be directed to bring you a finished product, like a wrapped finished product, because we can't, you know, if we take a first ordinance and we don't have, say, a percentage, or we have some language that is a substantive change, which almost what we're talking about is almost always going to be substantive because we're talking TABOR funding, it's going to be very sensitive, then we're going to, if we have to go back and forth the drawing board, we're not going to have time if we start it in January. We need it like ready to go in late December, was my advice.
Well, I really think that it's wise to do that. I know the petitioners would have to start collecting petitions on a certain date.
This would be I'm only talking about town planning.
I know, but I'm talking about the petitioner. They seem to be in a real tight time crunch.
They have the same timeline roughly,
okay.
But they have to, the difference with their timeline is they have to get the petition certified by our town clerk, by that, roughly the same time, early January. I'm speaking generalities, but it's January 4th. I did the schedules in your packet. But they have to collect a certain amount of signatures in a certain time period before that, which would start them collecting signatures in November. And theoretically, they can collect all the signatures they need for their petition or citizen-led initiative in the 5 days before they have to get it approved. But we all know logistically that's impossible. So they really have basically from now until beginning of January to collect those signatures.
Okay, that changes my perspective a little bit, because I would really like, because at any time, they could judge whether where we're going is something that they can support or live with, and not put and withdraw the petition, right? So, I would like to go ahead and, as soon as possible, get the folks together, the folks who are pushing for the petition, essentially PHP, okay, and the tourism board, and us together sometime first part of November. And see if we can come to some agreeable solution to what we should put on the ballot. And if we can't, then they can go ahead with our petition and we can do what we're gonna do, I guess. But bottom line is, we have a desire to put something on the ballot for a funding stream in April for workforce housing. However we work that.
We will put something on the ballot, I hope. And I hope it encompasses everything that the citizen-led initiative and what we as a council are trying to accomplish. I think we can.
I agree with that. I do too. So let's see if we can do a little more work and come back and have a drop dead date on making a decision. Whatever the drop dead date would be reasonably, and try to do that.
So I just point the council towards the election calendar that's in the packet, and that was our second reading at January 4th. It was our first reading in December 23rd of an ordinance.
Okay, so we want to do something as soon as possible, but, you know, we would like to have the appropriate. Okay, however we can do that, you know, we want to get the input that they want to offer.
Okay, so would you like me to then just put this on the November 2nd agenda and invite the tourism board and the county commissioners to attend that? Or do you want to try to have a separate meeting focused on this issue that's not on another evening when we're going to be doing other things?
Can we do it before? Well, I won't be here, so I guess I can't.
Maybe before that night?
I was thinking, no, I like it when we have kind of, all the stuff happen on one day. It's less time that has to be allocated, you know, from work or other responsibilities. So, no. I still don't see why we have to meet with them. Why can't we just ask them, hey, provide your comments? Because we're moving forward with this, and we want to know what you think and where you are. But I don't know that we actually need to sit down with them. They have not been incredibly responsive to our wanting to sit down on other topics, so.
You're talking county?
Yeah, I just feel like, you know, we're moving this thing forward, and we would like it for you to come along and to comment. Or to at the very least comment. If you want to come along, like, let's have that discussion, but I don't know that we need to carve time out and like try to accommodate the county specifically. And then the tourism board, I feel like they've already told us kind of where they stand and what they think, that to rehash that again is just duplication of efforts and a waste of time. But I do want their input. I'm not saying that that is not important, but we don't need to sit with them to get that input.
Could they send a representative or two to that meeting on November 2nd? Like Lori came tonight.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion.
That is.
Yeah, can Jenny, although she's staff, so she can't technically speak on behalf of the tourism board unless she's directed to, correct?
She could talk about the ways that the funds are spent, which might be helpful in terms of that 51% for the external marketing and what's being done there. I think it would be helpful if she was there. But no, she can't speak on behalf of the tourism board.
Yeah.
But we could invite a couple of them. So you want to put this on the November 2nd?
That's what I'm hearing.
Okay.
All right, and so what are we exactly trying to accomplish on November 2nd? We want to hear from them, and then we want to be able to give specific direction to staff about how we want to proceed,
About how we proceed with the reallocations.
so that they can start drafting an ordinance, so that we can start see first draft, come up with revisions, see second draft. And
Yeah,
that might take a month or, or 2 meetings away or something for an ordinance to be
That
drafted.
sounds right to me.
Well, I mean, one way to do it, and this is just going back to, for efficiency's sake, it might be helpful to see what ballot language might look like without numbers, and then plug and play numbers and see where you like stuff, because I do have some, just from a logistical standpoint, we're talking about that. I really would want direction to bring back like examples of what ballot language could look like, so that we're not scrambling. And then of course it's the council's job to put in the caveats and the subject tos and the percentages and all that. But we can, massage something, get something close to what it might look like, and then have town council fill in the substantive blanks, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that would be very helpful.
It does, yes.
And simple is better.
Yes.
Ballot language is incredibly confusing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would help, but then when you have decisions on the actual amounts and some specifics.
And of course, I think, the more options maybe you have, the better, because we don't, certainly staff doesn't want to be making decisions. So my suggestion would be with multiple examples of, different iterations of these different topics that you think we want to see.
Can I ask a schedule clarification? I believe I heard Clay, I think you said that the first reading would be on our December 23rd meeting. That looks like a town council work session. Or on the 16th is a regular meeting, unless I have it wrong on my calendar. So we couldn't do a first reading on a work session.
So your meetings that month would be December 7th and the 23rd. And your work session would be on the 30th. I'm assuming you're probably going to want to cancel that, maybe. It's right before the.
That's my bad for writing this wrong. All right, thank you.
Oh, I have it as the 16th as well.
So it's not the 16th, it's the 23rd?
No, the months when it's how it falls out in the month, so we always have a week between. So that month it would be the 7th and the 23rd,
Okay.
unless you decide to do something different.
Would it be reasonable, could we change it to the 16th?
No.
Sure.
Or is
You guys
that
can do a special meeting.
instead of the 23rd? I mean, I'm just thinking Christmas mayhem.
Sure.
It might be better to have it a 1 week early just to not fall.
Yep, it would be a special meeting, and then you would cancel the 23rd. That would be the typically regularly scheduled.
Does that work better I'm ambivalent, I could do either.
Way better.
Way better on the 16th? Oh, right, because you guys are gonna be getting hammered up in the ski area.
Like having a fun day.
Right.
Pour some more water.
Okay, 7th and 16th. And that way we can go ahead and deal with this a little more in a second, and have hopefully some direction as far as just the general language, and know what decisions we have to make as council in regard to that. And that would also give the folks who really want to get a petition out there the chance to see where we're going and see if they can live with it, see if it sounds like it's agreeable. And if it's not, we still have the option to go ahead and pursue the petition.
So the issues that you're interested in are reallocation of the lodging tax and the excise tax, and we'll do some estimates as to what that could bring in. Are you interested in any other, like the charter amendments related to council compensation or anything like that? That's no.
No.
Okay, so we'll just focus on those two items then?
Well, and the increase in lodgers tax, and what those numbers look like.
Reallocation, the lodger's tax increase, excise tax.
Correct.
Yeah.
Estimates. Okay, and then we'll invite interested parties to come and attend that meeting and give comments.
So, is there anything that we're not thinking about with the county as far as the IGA?
We need to look into that and bring that as well as the code language and everything. And
'Cause there's
also the the actual language of that voter approval too, so yeah.
It seems like there's always the potential that they might not like our course of action and just pull out of the IGA.
Could be a possibility. Which is why it would be good to reach out to them.
Right.
Yes.
Okay. Are we at a point where we can move on?
I think so.
Clear as mud stuff?
Okay. That was the big one. Okay, James, now you are on.
Thank you. Good evening,
Thank you for that.
So this item's coming before you regarding a development application that the Planning Commission has approved in sketch plan for the development of the houses at 2 Doves located at 320 Hot Springs Boulevard. This is the location on Hot Springs Boulevard where the old Juanita Church is located. The project entails construction of a boutique lodging establishment with an event venue constructed in 2 phases. For a build-out of 16 total lodging units, which are built as small cottages. So it's kind of a detached lodging establishment, if you will. Applicant proposes to construct and pave the needed portion of Park Street and their parking lot. However, the applicant is seeking relief from the requirement to pave Spring Street. So in your packet, you can have a map of that site plan, and their main access is going to be up Spring Street, which is adjacent to the post office there. But only that first section is paved, which really accommodates the post office access. Up to Park Street, which is generally our Reservoir Hill parking lot, but Park Street also extends south of Spring Street. And it does back up to about 3 properties on the back side of those properties that are located on Hot Springs Boulevard. So that's going to be their access up Spring Street, and they will be required to actually improve that unapproved portion of Park Street between Spring Street and their access to the parking lot. So the Planning Commission did, like I mentioned, approve their sketch major design review application with some contingencies that included a recommendation that Town Council consider waiving the requirement for paving Spring Street or consider an in lieu fee for a share of paving Spring Street based on the build-out traffic generation created by the development. The project does still need to go through final major design review, but I think the applicant is certainly waiting for determination from Town Council on this matter. I think this is a unique situation where, typically a development is required to pave their complete access, and ensure that's improved with hard surface pavement, whether it's concrete or asphalt, really as a means for dust mitigation and drainage considerations. And part of that is in our code because of the dust mitigation funds we receive from the federal government through the CMAQ funds that CDOT has administered for many years, really as a dust mitigation measure for our community. I mean, as many of you may be aware, Archuleta County had some pretty bad air dust pollution back in the 80s, and that's why we're eligible for these dust mitigation funds to pave our dirt streets. So we've done a lot of paving over the last 4 decades. That funding is eventually running out, but with that said, we still want to make sure that we are not creating any nuisances by allowing dirt streets in our community. So with that said, the Planning Commission did consider this and are recommending you consider either a waiver or a reduced fee for paving that. And I think it's a legitimate consideration when you think about the current use of that, which is really mainly access to Reservoir Hill, and the potential future access for the other 2 properties that are adjacent to the Park Street extension south of Spring Street on what their development traffic generation might be. So we had, for conversation purposes, I did work on at least generating some estimated traffic generation for what we're seeing on Reservoir Hill now, and what those other two lots may see. And really, I think generally, they're all going to be a little bit equal. When I look at Reservoir Hill, certainly we have a lot of peak time in the summertime, maybe a little less in the winter time. But I think generally we're probably seeing approximately 200 average daily trips. And that's one trip up, and one trip down is two trips. So one access to Reservoir Hill is 2 ATs. So that's about 100 vehicles a day on average throughout the year. When I look at the other two vacant lots, the vacant lot next to Spring Street, and then the Doves at Pagosa, 2 Doves is in the middle, and the lot south of that, I think looking at maximum build out on a mixed use development on those lots, they could also generate up to 200 EDTs for each lot. And 2 Doves is going to be pretty close to that as well when we consider the traffic generation for their event venue as part of this development. So in essence, I think the 2 Doves development could generate 25% of the traffic that Spring Street will see with the eventual developments and build out of the other 2 lots that surround the 2 Doves property. Did some just basic estimates of what paving Spring Street would be, and we looked at just carrying it on from the existing pavement now, so not taking it all the way down to Hot Springs Boulevard, carrying it on to just east of where the pavement is for the post office exit, up through the Park Street right away. And we're looking at about between $40,000 and $50,000, depending on oil prices and when we actually pave that. So it's probably, you think about the maximum being about $50,000, and a quarter, 25% for each one of those uses. We're looking at about $12,500 for everybody's share. Reservoir Hill, 2 vacant parcels, and 2 Doves. $12,500 approximately, up to that amount for their share of paving Spring Street. So what we've provided to you is 3 options. One, just require the development to pave Spring Street at their expense. That could include an option for reimbursement for the other lots that may develop and take advantage of that payment. And it may include town to contribute their portion of the traffic generation, $12,500 approximately. Or the town council could consider waiving the requirement totally and taking on that obligation potentially in the future, or just charging them an in lieu fee of 25%, and town council can make the determination on whether they're going to utilize that in lieu fee, if you will, to pave that section of Spring Street, whether it's in the near future or a few years down the road. I think one thing to be sensitive of is just the traffic generation that the business will create, and potentially creating a little bit more dust activity there. We see a little bit of that in the summertime, kind of in between the times we've mag chlorided for the festival activity. When that wears off, we do see a little dust generation from the traffic. But those are some considerations for purposes of discussion. I try to outline that best I could in your staff report. I'm available for questions.
Go ahead, Matt.
And then Shari, did they look at using Hot Springs Boulevard for access?
Yes, back in the day, I think this predates my time here, but there was kind of motivation to get access using Spring Street to kind of reduce the curb cuts on the street frontage. And there's some terrain issues there too. If you look at that lot, I think you've got a big terrain difference all of a sudden. And I think the desire along Hot Springs Boulevard is really putting that parking facilities behind the development, keeping it more of a pedestrian environment along the streetlight.
Sure.
James, your estimate of 50,000, does that include curb, gutter, sidewalk, drainage, all that kind of stuff?
No, so that's just pavement, keeping, so no curb and gutter, keeping the drainage inside the roadside ditches and not doing any curb and gutter. And utilizing the current curb ditches we have there for that handling drainage. One of the considerations of curb and gutter and maintaining the drainage on the roadway, it will be gushing down Spring Street into Hot Springs Boulevard. So we were comfortable working with Martin that we maintain the ditches for drainage. The sidewalk connectivity wouldn't be up Spring Street because they're providing it along Hot Springs Boulevard to access the development. So it's just pavements. We wouldn't have to do much base work there because we've got an established dirt road, so we don't have any compaction concerns. So it would be just preparing the surface and providing the pavement on top.
So no widening it to make it better for two vehicles to pass each other, just paving over basically what's there?
Yeah, we have enough width, and we kind of estimated up to 26 feet of pavement, just to kind of make sure we had plenty of room for a little shoulder area, but 26 was kind of an extreme width. I think we can get away to 24. Typically, we go a little bit wider so we don't get vehicles for non-curb and gutter applications, so that the vehicles aren't rattling off the edge of the asphalt. We give them plenty of room and put a fog line in there so that they're not driving on the edge of the asphalt, which deteriorates that edge.
So Martin, is this currently on our plan in the future to actually pave this?
No, so Spring Street is kind of considered that entrance to Reservoir Hill, and you're moving into a gravel parking lot, and a kind of it's a pretty steep little section of road, but we've been able to hold it based on the current traffic using mag chloride and a motor grader. We're trying to pave areas with much higher levels of AET than the current 100. So it's not currently on the list, but we could maneuver it.
So if we work out an agreement with them to only pay 25%, then we're looking at adding this to our already plans that we have in place for maintenance and such through the town. Thank you.
Okay.
What happens to the gravel road if you increase traffic as much as James projected? Does that really wear it out much faster than it is? Yeah.
Yeah, so gravel road is reactive to the stresses you put on the surface.
Yeah.
So as soon as you get something that's weak and you're doing 100 trips a day, it takes two times to break it. But when you increase it to 200 trips a day, then it drops down it cuts that time in half. So yeah, it is proportional to the amount of traffic that's on the road on how fast it comes apart.
So I would argue that it's pretty imperative to pave this due to the load that's being added by this development, and I think that the applicant should pay a fair portion of paving the street. I mean, then it comes back to us to pay for our portion, but I don't think we should waive that at all. There's a lot of business value to this applicant to have this paved. Well, one is, the dust. I live near enough to see this, and I see dust plumes all the time off of that road. Most of the time, the wind's from the south, so it's blowing to the businesses to the north. With this increase in traffic, that's an awful lot more dust on those businesses and people that are right there to the north. I think we have to mitigate that. And it's also valuable in the winter and the mud season when you'll be tracking mud everywhere into this guy's business, and I think there's a lot of business value there for a price of $12.5. That sounds like a bargain to me.
Okay, anybody else have any questions or comments?
I agree with Jeff. Like I think we can meet them halfway, but I'm not in favor of just paving it for them. I don't see the community benefit, but. Yeah, if we're going to spend taxpayer dollars on it, I'd like the taxpayers to have some benefit in a boutique hotel and event center. Is not something that I think most of our constituents are going to be using on a regular basis.
Right, and it's a form of leverage. If we spend our money on paving our portion, our 25%, of the business users pay the rest. So for $12.5, we get a $50,000 road.
So sorry, I kind of
well, found out there for a minute. So anyway, it's past my bedtime, guys. So either way, the road is gonna have to be paved at some point in the future. Or is that not the full intention? Because I kind of like it being that rustic entrance to Reservoir Hill. And I'm so sorry that you guys probably just said this, but I'm going back.
It's not in any of our capital plans, so this would be triggering
something else.
Something to happen if we want to see it paved.
So I'm in favor of kind of keeping Reservoir Hill a little bit more of that rustic vibe, and so maybe coming up with an alternative to pavement, if that's using their in lieu payment to, I don't know, invest in some sort of de-duster that's not my ride or
Duster.
Okay.
Anyways, and like reasonably speaking too, people going in and out of this development, their speeds are not going to be that high that it's going to be kicking up a whole bunch of dust either. They're going to be slowly pulling out of this area and then slowly pulling out of Pagosa Street
But it's
too.
double the traffic, it's double the impact, it's double the, I just don't think gravel is sustainable. And that road in the springtime gets pretty gnarly already.
There's also a gravel road for the north entrance if you want to rustically enter.
Well, and we're only looking at going just to serve the CASA. We're not looking at going the rest of the way up to the gate, and that's,
So, any other discussion?
So what would it look like if, what would it look like for us if we say, okay, this developer's 25%, the town's 25%. When these other two pieces develop, they would reimburse the town the 12.5 or whatever it cost. So we're still splitting it 4 ways, but the town is carrying it until those two places develop.
Yeah, we can formulate that. We have to record some things of the properties, or record something with county clerk so that it's recorded on those properties, so that they are aware that obligation exists if they develop. So, at the time they develop, we would have a little bit better idea of what the traffic generation based on the development. So we can kind of prorate that share of that based on what their true development is. So it may not end up being 25%, but it would be a portion of whatever their share of that traffic generation.
So you're saying for those people, like if they developed a lot between Casa and Spring Street, if theirs ends up not being a true 25%, then we would not ask them for the whole 25%?
Right, I think it's fair, and we just asked position would be fair, say they only get their traffic generation based on their proposed development is going to generate 180 Ts instead of 280 Ts. Then maybe reasonable to think that their share is only based on the average daily trips that they're going to generate. So that's the real impact on that roadway.
Okay, any other questions or discussion? Are we ready for a vote? Somebody like to make one? Go ahead. Yeah.
Mr. Mayor, I approve a partial waiver pursuant to LUDC Section 1.2.1 for providing the required hard surface to vehicular primary access road improvements along Spring Street for the proposed Casa 2 Doves development at 320 Hot Springs Boulevard, and instead require an in lieu fee structured at 25% of the cost associated with hard surface improvement for Spring Street.
And do we need to add something to that so that we attach those other fees to those other two lots? Or is it covered by what you said?
You can amend that so it's official to ensure that we, structure structure a reimbursement for the other developments that will take advantage of that infrastructure.
Comma, and to restructure the payments that the other two developments may add to this paving project.
Nice.
Is that something you were intending to do with that?
I don't know.
No, I think that's fair. should, the others should, and I second that.
Okay.
We do have a motion,
One second.
and we do have a second.
Yeah.
All in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Early child care and education funding request. April, you still awake? Yeah.
I am still here. So I'll try and make this short and quick. So at the beginning of October, I brought to you the in-home daycare request for funding. I received 2 of them. Shortly after that, after you approved that, I received another one. Actually, what I received was the gal said, did I get any funding? And I said, I don't know who you are, or I never got an application from you. And she showed me where she did actually email me. It didn't come into my inbox, it didn't come into my junk mail, I never received it, and she did send it in time for the deadline. So I did let her know that I would bring it to council for your decision if you want to provide funding for this applicant. Her name is Teresa Mail. She is Teresa's Little Blessings Childcare. She did ask for $1,500. Remember the last time we gave those 2 in-home daycares $1,250 each. That did use up all the rest of the funding that we had budgeted for. So if you do approve any monies to Teresa, it would be over the allotted budget amount. So honestly, I apologize. I didn't get this request, but I did tell her I would bring it before council for your decision on it.
Okay. Any discussion or any questions?
I am very much in favor of giving her $1,500.
Well, we gave the other 2 $12.50.
She asked for 15.
Well, the other 2 also asked for 15.
The other 2 asked for 15 also.
And we gave them what?
$12.50.
Oh,
We split the difference so that we know the budget.
We gave them a portion we divided it in half of the money.
Oh, that changes things. I think that part. You know, this is another example of like supporting our local community. And she's been in business for 20 plus years, and you know, an entire generation of kids have gone through there, and she missed the deadline. I don't know that well, maybe she didn't, but somehow that was missed and it was dropped and whatever. I just, like tonight, my heart is just very much on like our people. And so.
Should we just give her the equivalent of what we do?
Probably, yeah, that would
to
be
make
fair.
it fair across the
$12.50.
Can I have another perspective? I think taking care of our people means that we stick to budget, that we don't bust budget, that we honor the tax dollars we've earned, and we restrain ourselves sometimes. My heart goes out too, but we've spent our budget.
But through no fault of her own.
Correct, but no fault of ours either.
Yeah.
So if this had come in and it had been part of the package, maybe we would have split the remaining 3 ways, and she would have received whatever that is divided by 3.
You're fair but callous.
In light of our sales tax revenues for this year, I would move that we approve the early child care and education funding of $1,250 to Teresa Mail's in-home daycare center and amend the 2021 budget to reflect that.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Roll call vote, please.
He's gonna be the one that cancels Christmas this year.
I won't have to do it.
So roll call vote, April, please.
Councilmember DeGraaf.
Aye.
DeGuise.
Aye.
Bergon.
Aye.
Pierce.
Aye.
Posey.
Nay.
Mayor Volger.
Aye.
Thank you.
Appreciate
Okay.
It is about, it is.
You guys made the right decision, but I got my name.
Very strong name.
Feel for it. Yeah. Okay, last item is third quarter financial review.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll keep it very brief. You have in your packet the report that was prepared by April. So April, please jump in if there's something that I'm saying incorrectly. We did get our audited, unassigned 2020 carryover for 2021, and those figures are shown here. In short, we brought in more revenues than what we had budgeted. As we talked about earlier, sales tax, we are projecting to come in 22% above what we had initially budgeted, and that's with 8 months of data in so far. We also received several grants throughout the year that were not originally budgeted for. So we got the Bell Tower Park grant, Mesa Canyon takeout funds from different sources, the Pagosa Springs Cemetery Archaeological Assessment Grant. The State Health Department gave us funds that will mostly be applied into next year for the pump station replacement project, and we got American Rescue Plan funds to be used for sanitation and geothermal support. We did have some expenditures that were not budgeted for, so we purchased the property here to the south of Town Hall. There were some housing projects that council provided sewer connection fees and waivers for. The council wanted to pay off the loan on the vacuum truck, so that was taken care of. Based on the compensation survey for the police department, there were several adjustments made there to the salaries. Let's see here. So I think that's pretty much it. So overall, we are looking better, both on the revenue side, bringing in more than what we had budgeted, pretty much for all funds. And then we are planning to spend less than what we had anticipated in all funds except for geothermal. And a lot of that has to do with the replacement of that line associated with the McCabe Creek project. I did include, well, April included in your packet just an overview of all of our debt. So I know council has been interested in the past when we have additional revenues that we had not budgeted for and being more aggressive in some of our payoff. So that information is included within the packet, maybe something to consider for budget discussions starting next week. If you want to be more aggressive in paying some of that off, or if there's other things that you want to do with those additional funds. But with that, I will try to answer any questions that you have, or April will answer any questions that you have since she has the detailed information. So, but overall, looking very good.
Okay, any questions?
Ken, I'm sorry, you know it's gonna be me. I really want to start paying off on that maintenance facility so we can free up some funds in the future for projects. But I don't want to overspend in light of us taking opportunities to purchase land when we can. So can we ask staff to come back with a recommendation on an amount that we can look at that would allow us to pay some on that and still reserve some funds for perhaps purchasing land or doing infrastructure improvements for housing?
Yes.
I think based on our, what we've done just recently, I think that that's a great recommendation. So we will direct staff to do that.
And Mr. Posey, I know that's not in the budget.
Well, there's a leverage issue there. We'll discuss that in our budget workshop.
Okay, we're down to public comment at the end. Okay, go.
Thank you so much. That was the most entertaining meeting I've been at all day. I did invite the 3 county commissioners to come to this meeting. I personally invited all 3 of them to come to the meeting. And we got a candidate, but we didn't get the commissioners. And I didn't see a lot of the tourism board here. I think that's unfortunate that we didn't see them turn out except for Lori. I'm excited about meeting with Matt, Councilmember DeGraaf, in the very near future, I hope, and seeing if we can all work together on this, because I think we can. So that's my comments.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Okay, closed for public comment. Council comments and upcoming agenda items. What do you got?
I think we got plenty.
Yeah.
Laid out already.
Okay, so we'll just kind of keep it that way.
Well, I just want us to hang out for a while longer, so it can be 4 hours. So I can always go.
What's the record?
Oh, I have no idea. We made it to 10. Yeah, we've had it until 10 p.m. Somewhat recently. The last couple months. Yeah, we did used to have dinner breaks. Well, that's why it went so long. Well.
They were working dinners.
Yeah, the 10 o'clock one was with no dinner.
I'll tell you what, since we're going to limit the time on public comment, we should do that probably for council also. Okay, I think we are ready to almost adjourn, but the next council meeting will be on November 2nd. We've already talked about that. We already have quite a bit on that agenda. So, and staff has some prep to do. So, anyway, I'll accept a motion to adjourn.
I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to remind the council that Thursday, the 28th, is your budget work session. If you have questions that you know of in advance, certainly next week is your time to go through things, and we'll come up with kind of an outline to go through things. But as you're going through the proposed document, if you have questions or have additional information that you want us to prepare, it would be very helpful if you would let us know in advance so that we can make the most of your time there.
That's great.
Okay?
And
you're not going to be at that meeting, right?
I will not, so you will be chairing it.
Will you, Andrea, just let me know if there's anything specific that I need to do?
Yes, yeah, we'll come up with kind of how we have in the past, we'll come up with kind of an outline of the topics that we want to cover within that.
Okay.
We'll get it out.
Okay. Anything else? Okay, I'll accept the motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Do we have a second? Any objection? We're done.
Thank you.